There is a strange moment that happens when life hits you hard. You could be sitting there with your chest tight, your plans falling apart, your mind spinning, and suddenly the room that once felt full feels unbelievably empty. Pain has this way of clearing the space around you. Not gently, not politely. It just strips away the noise until the people who truly care become impossible to miss. Before we continue, a quick note. Many of you watch our videos, but haven't subscribed yet. So please subscribe to our channel Restwise and join our growing community. We'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's amazing to see how connected we all are. If you enjoy relaxing with philosophy, psychology, and science while drifting into sleep, give this video a like and stay with us on the journey. Now, let's get back to the video. You do not really notice this during the good times. When everything is smooth, everyone looks like a friend. People laugh with you, respond quickly, show interest, and you start to think your circle is solid. But the very moment pain shows up, something shifts. The energy changes. The invitations slow down. The people who only stayed for your light start to back away the second your sky turns darker. It catches you off guard, almost like your mind tries to negotiate what is happening. You tell yourself maybe they are busy, maybe you are overthinking, maybe they will show up tomorrow. But deep down you feel the truth humming under your ribs. Pain does not lie. It exposes. There is a psychological reason this happens. Human beings instinctively move toward comfort and away from emotional effort. Supporting someone in pain is not just a nice act. It costs emotional energy, time, presence, and sometimes even confronting your own fears and insecurities. Most people are not actually willing to do that. They prefer the version of you that is easy to be around, the version that entertains them, uplifts them, or benefits them. But the moment you need something real, the moment your heart is heavier than usual, they quietly slip out of the frame. And then there are the few who do the complete opposite. They check in without being asked. They listen without rushing you. They remember the small details of what you said. They show up when it is inconvenient, not just when it is fun. And the most surprising part is that these people are rarely the ones you expect. Pain reveals hidden champions. People who were never loud, never demanding attention, never trying to impress you. But the second you start breaking, they move toward you instead of away from you. It almost feels like life is performing a test behind the scenes, not to punish you, but to protect you from carrying weak connections into the next chapter. Pain forces clarity. It shows you who loves your soul and who only liked the benefits of being around you. It shows you who sees you and who only sees what they can take from you. It shows you who is willing to stand with you, even when you are not at your best. There is a moment that comes after this realization. It is not anger. It is not bitterness. It is a sharp kind of understanding. You realize you have been giving pieces of yourself to people who never truly valued them. You realize you were overestimating certain connections out of hope, not reality. And you realize you no longer need to chase anyone. The people who care will make themselves known without being asked. The ones who want to stay will stay without requiring an invitation. Pain teaches you something else too. It teaches you that your worth was never tied to how many people surrounded you. Your worth is measured by the depth of the connections you keep, not the number of them. One person who genuinely cares can bring more healing into your life than 20 people who only show up when the sun shines. So when pain reveals the truth, let it. Let the space around you shrink. Let the silence speak. Let the real ones step forward. That moment when everything feels like it is falling apart is often the moment your support system rebuilds itself in a healthier way. Pain is demanding, but it is honest. And sometimes honesty is the very thing you need to see the people who never stopped caring about you. Disappointment builds emotional maturity. It is strange how a single moment of disappointment can hit harder than a dozen warnings. You think you are prepared. You think you understand people. You think you have everything under control. And then something does not go the way you hoped. It lands in your chest like a heavy stone, and suddenly you are forced to confront parts of yourself you normally avoid. Disappointment has this quiet way of maturing you without asking for permission. At first, the emotional reaction feels almost childish. You want to pull away, shut down, maybe even throw a mental tantrum. You replay conversations in your head, analyze what should have happened, imagine the version of reality you wanted. But as the frustration settles, a different voice starts to rise inside you. It is calmer, more grounded, and it whispers a truth most people do not want to face. You are not just upset at what happened. You are upset because your expectations were built on hope, not accuracy. That realization, as uncomfortable as it is, pushes you forward. The brain has a built-in survival system that triggers strong reactions when something unexpected disrupts your emotional balance. Psychologists call it prediction error. When your mind believes something will go a certain way and the outcome does not match, the emotional shock forces your brain to update its understanding. In simple terms, every disappointment rewires you. It makes you wiser, sharper, more capable of seeing things as they are instead of how you wish they were. And that is where maturity begins. Not in age, not in experience alone, but in the ability to face reality without collapsing under it. Disappointment becomes the training ground for emotional strength. You stop assuming people will act the way you would act. You stop expecting life to reward you simply because you tried. You stop confusing effort with entitlement. Instead, you start observing. You start listening. You start recognizing patterns in people and patterns in yourself. You learn that some people will promise more than they can deliver. You learn that timing really does matter. You learn that not every door that closes is a personal attack. And you learn that your peace cannot rely on perfect outcomes. Once that lesson sinks in, you stop taking things so personally. You stop spiraling over what you cannot control. You stop handing your emotional well-being to situations that were fragile from the start. There is something powerful that happens when disappointment no longer breaks you. It shapes you. It softens the parts of you that were too rigid and strengthens the parts of you that were too soft. You begin to understand your own limits. You become more cautious, not in a fearful way, but in a self-respecting way. Your patience grows. Your emotional reactions slow down. You think before speaking. You pause before assuming. You give yourself time to respond instead of reacting out of old wounds. Disappointment also teaches you to appreciate people who are consistent. Reliability becomes more valuable than charm. Effort becomes more meaningful than promises. Presence becomes more important than intensity. You start noticing who shows up even when circumstances are not ideal. You start recognizing who keeps their word without being reminded. And slowly, your standards shift. Not in a bitter way, but in a mature way. The most meaningful part of this whole process is realizing that disappointment is not a punishment. It is a mirror. It reflects your assumptions, your weaknesses, your desires, and your blind spots. When you look into that mirror long enough, you start to see the version of yourself you are becoming. More patient, more aware, more emotionally balanced, less thrown around by the world, and more anchored within yourself. Eventually, disappointment stops feeling like the end of something and starts feeling like the beginning of clearer understanding. You learn to say, "That hurt, but it taught me something." You learn to adjust without losing hope. You learn to trust yourself more than the outcome. And that is when real emotional maturity settles in. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is this steady confidence that grows inside you, a quiet strength built from every moment life did not go your way, but you learned how to rise anyway. Rejection teaches self-worth. There is a moment after rejection where everything inside you goes silent. It is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of impact, like your mind is trying to understand how something you wanted, something you believed in, suddenly slipped out of your hands. Rejection hits differently because it targets the parts of you that feel the most personal. But if you sit with it long enough, if you listen to what it is trying to show you, you start to realize that rejection is not the enemy. It is the beginning of understanding your own worth. At first it feels like a verdict. You think it means you were not enough, not impressive enough, not lovable enough, not valuable enough. The mind rushes to fill in the blanks with the harshest explanations it can create. That is your survival instinct trying to protect you, trying to make sense of the feeling by turning it into a story. But those stories are rarely true. They are emotional guesses, not accurate reflections. What rejection actually does is force a moment of clarity. It shakes you out of the fantasy that someone else gets to decide your value. When someone turns you down, walks away, or chooses something else, they are not evaluating your soul. They are reacting from their own perspective, their own needs, their own timing, their own fears, their own limitations. The mistake we all make is assuming their decision means something permanent about us. It never does. There is a psychological effect at play here called external referencing. It means you measure your worth based on how others respond to you. Rejection disrupts that system, sometimes violently, and it forces you to find a different source of validation. Yourself, your effort, your values, your identity. That shift hurts, but it is life-changing. The more you experience rejection, the more you start to notice patterns. You begin to see that every time someone told you no, life was redirecting you towards something that actually aligned with who you are. The job you did not get pushed you toward a path you never would have considered. The person who did not choose you cleared the space for someone who truly will. The opportunity that fell through forced you to build skills you were avoiding. Rejection is not destruction. It is direction. And here is where self-worth begins to grow. You stop chasing places where you are not wanted. You stop begging for attention that feels forced. You stop shrinking yourself just to be tolerated. Rejection teaches you to walk away not with bitterness, but with understanding. You learn to say, if this door closed, it was not my door. If this person left, they were not my person. If this path rejected me, it was not my path. There is a strength that forms from this mindset. You become more selective, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. You no longer accept crumbs and call it connection. You no longer wait for someone to maybe see your value someday. You no longer try to convince anyone to keep you. You learn that someone seeing your worth is not luck. It is alignment. And alignment never requires begging. The most powerful part of rejection is that it forces you to meet yourself. It makes you ask, what do I actually deserve? What do I truly want? What am I no longer willing to compromise? These questions sharpen your identity like nothing else. And once you answer them honestly, you stop fearing rejection altogether. You realize it was never threatening your worth. It was revealing it. Because when a person or opportunity pushes you away, it is often life revealing that you were asking for less than you deserved. It is life saying, not here, not with them, not like this. It may feel painful in the moment, but in the long run it becomes one of the strongest lessons you will ever learn. Rejection is not the moment you lose value. It is the moment you finally understand it. Failure shapes stronger foundations. There is something almost humiliating about failing. It hits with this heavy mix of embarrassment, frustration, and disbelief. You had a plan. You had a picture in your mind of how things were supposed to go. And then reality showed up with a different story. Failure has a way of knocking the wind out of you, but beneath the sting there is a truth that almost no one recognizes in the moment. Failure is not the breaking of your foundation. It is the rebuilding of it. Most people only see the crash. They focus on what went wrong, what collapsed, what slipped through their fingers. They forget that every structure, even the strongest ones, needs pressure tests. When engineers build skyscrapers, they deliberately stress the materials to find weaknesses before the real world can exploit them. Failure in life works the exact same way. It exposes the cracks you did not want to notice. It shows you the skills you need to sharpen. It forces you to confront the habits and beliefs that were holding you back long before the fall. In those first moments, though, all you feel is the collapse. You replay what happened, searching for the exact second everything tipped. You start blaming yourself, doubting your abilities, questioning whether you were ever capable in the first place. That emotional spiral is normal. The brain reacts to failure the same way it reacts to danger. It triggers a flood of stress hormones designed to make you retreat. But if you resist that first impulse to hide, something powerful begins to shift. After the shock fades, you start to see things with sharper clarity. Failure becomes a mirror that shows you where your foundation was too soft, too rushed, too dependent on luck, too fragile to hold what you were reaching for. You begin to realize that the fall did not happen because you were unworthy. It happened because the version of you that attempted it was not fully formed yet. That is not an insult. That is the invitation. Every meaningful success story carries a quiet chapter of failure. Not as a footnote, but as the turning point. Failure introduces you to discipline you never had before. It teaches you the details you used to ignore. It forces you to slow down, to become intentional, to build with patience instead of impulse. You start planning differently. You start preparing differently. You start seeing angles and risks that the old you would have walked right past. Failure sharpens your intuition too. You learn to sense when something is off before the damage happens. You recognize patterns, both in yourself and in the environment around you. You develop a stronger instinct for what works and what does not. These are the foundations of resilience, and they cannot be learned through comfort. They are earned through trial, error, and the courage to try again. Something else happens that most people never expect. Failure adjusts your relationship with fear. Once you have fallen, once you have survived the thing you thought would destroy your confidence, you stop being afraid of taking risks. You realize that the worst-case scenario did not end you. It educated you. And with every attempt that follows, you carry more knowledge, more awareness, more strength than the version of you that failed. This is why people who have failed deeply often end up building the strongest lives. They are not fragile anymore. They know how to stand back up. They know how to rebuild from scratch. They know how to keep going even when momentum disappears. And most importantly, they know who they are when everything falls apart. That kind of self-knowledge is a foundation no setback can shake. The truth is that failure is not a sign that you are off your path. It is often the sign that you are finally on it. It clears away false confidence and replaces it with real capability. It removes illusions and replaces them with understanding. It strips away ego and replaces it with grounded strength. So when failure hits, painful as it is, do not mistake it for the end. It is the construction phase. It is the moment the foundation you actually need begins to form beneath your feet. You are not losing everything. You are learning how to build something that will not fall the next time life tests its weight. Heartbreak teaches what love isn't. There is a moment after heartbreak that feels like the world is moving in slow motion. You wake up and everything looks the same, yet nothing feels the same. It is like someone quietly reached inside you and rearranged the furniture of your soul. At first, all you can feel is what you lost, the weight of it, the shock of it, the hollowness that shows up in your chest without warning. But as the days stretch out, something deeper begins to reveal itself. Heartbreak does not just show you what love can be. It shows you, with painful clarity, what love is not. Most people mistake intensity for love. The constant messages, the long nights talking, the excitement that hits your stomach like a rush. Those things feel powerful, but they can disappear the moment real commitment or emotional depth is required. Heartbreak forces you to confront that difference. You start to realize how much of what you thought was love was actually attachment, convenience, habit, or longing disguised as connection. It is a brutal realization, but it is honest. Your mind begins reviewing the relationship like an investigator replaying a scene. You remember the moments when you felt unseen, but convinced yourself it was nothing. The times you tried to communicate, but ended up apologizing instead. The subtle ways you shrunk yourself to avoid conflict. The emotional imbalance you tolerated because you wanted the story of the relationship to stay alive. Heartbreak brings all of that into focus, not to hurt you, but to reveal the truth you were too close to see. There is a psychological mechanism behind this shift. When you are in love, your brain releases a cocktail of chemicals that heighten desire and blur red flags. Dopamine, oxytocin, even adrenaline create a kind of emotional tunnel vision. But once the breakup happens and those chemicals drop, the fog lifts and your perception becomes clear again. This is why so many people look back and say, "I cannot believe I accepted that." Heartbreak is the clarity that arrives after the chemistry fades. And once the clarity comes, something powerful begins to unfold. You start to see the difference between effort and excuses. You start to recognize that love is not supposed to be earned through suffering. You start to understand that real love does not require you to abandon yourself just to keep the peace. You begin to realize that someone choosing you temporarily is not the same as someone choosing you fully. Heartbreak also teaches you what presence feels like and what absence reveals. When the person is gone, you finally notice how often they were emotionally gone, even when they were physically there. You remember the unanswered messages, the conversations that were always one-sided, the moments you needed reassurance, and instead received silence or deflection. These realizations are painful, but they rebuild your standards from the inside out. Then something subtle and beautiful begins to happen. Your self-respect starts returning. Your boundaries start forming. You begin to understand that love is not meant to feel like waiting, like hoping, like trying to prove yourself worthy. Love that is real is consistent. It is nourishing. It is honest. It shows up without being chased. It grows without being forced. Heartbreak teaches this by contrast. It shows you how wrong things were so you never repeat the pattern. It teaches you that love should not drain you. Love should not confuse you. Love should not make you feel like you are asking for too much just because you want to be understood. And most importantly, heartbreak teaches you that the right person will never make you betray yourself to keep them close. The deeper lesson is that heartbreak is not the end of your ability to love. It is the end of your willingness to accept less than love. It makes you more aware, more discerning, more grounded in what you deserve. It turns your heart from something fragile into something wise, and wisdom is what protects you from repeating old mistakes. Eventually, the pain softens, and in that softness you recognize the gift hidden inside it. Heartbreak removes the illusion of love so you can recognize the real thing when it finally arrives. It hurts, but it cleans you. It shakes you, but it teaches you. And when you finally step into a love that is patient, safe, and mutual, you will know it instantly. Because heartbreak already taught you everything it is not. Loss shows the value of presence. There is a moment after loss when the world feels strangely distant, almost muted, like someone turned down the volume on life. You move through your day, doing the same things you always do, but everything carries a different weight. You begin to realize that what you lost was not just a person or a thing. It was a presence, a feeling, a rhythm in your life you never paused long enough to fully appreciate. Loss forces you into a kind of awareness that comfort never could. It shows you the value of presence in a way nothing else can. Before loss, it is easy to assume you have time. You assume the people you care about will always answer your messages. You assume the routines you rely on will stay exactly as they are. You assume the moments you share will be repeated again and again. We live with this quiet illusion that life is stable, that everything we love will remain within reach. But loss breaks that illusion instantly. It pushes you into a reality where absence is louder than any sound. At first, the shock feels unfair. You find yourself thinking about moments you rushed through, conversations you cut short, memories you never created because you were too distracted. Loss has a way of replaying what you overlooked. It shows you how often you were physically present but emotionally miles away. And that realization stings, not because you meant to ignore anyone, but because you finally understand how precious those simple, ordinary moments actually were. There is a psychological reason loss hits this deeply. The brain is wired to prioritize what is consistent and predictable. When someone or something is always there, your mind stops assigning urgency to it. It becomes part of your baseline, part of the background of your life. Only when that presence is removed does the brain snap into awareness and reveal how much emotional stability it was providing. This is why absence feels so sharp. It is the contrast that reveals the truth. Over time, loss begins shifting your perspective in quiet, but powerful ways. You start paying more attention to the people who matter. You listen more closely when they speak. You take fewer moments for granted. You stop assuming you will get another chance to say the things you have been holding inside. Loss teaches you to slow down around the people who fill your life with meaning, because you finally understand how fragile time truly is. And it does something else. It strips away your tolerance for superficial connections. You no longer have the energy for people who drain you, ignore you, or take you for granted. When you have tasted real absence, you no longer exchange your time for half-hearted presence. You start choosing relationships that feel alive, reciprocal, grounded. Loss clarifies what deserves space in your life and what never did. There is a maturity that forms in you after loss settles, a softer patience, a deeper gratitude. You start noticing small things, like the sound of someone laughing, the warmth of a hug, the feeling of being understood without having to explain everything. These moments used to blend into the background, but now they stand out because you know how easily they can disappear. Loss also teaches you to be more present with yourself. When everything around you shifts, you begin to examine your own habits, your own priorities, your own emotional distance. You recognize how often you rush through life without truly experiencing it. Loss pushes you inward and asks you to reconnect with the parts of yourself you have been neglecting. You realize that presence is not just something you offer to others. It is something you must offer to yourself. Eventually, the pain softens enough to let wisdom rise. You start to understand that presence is the real currency of life, not gifts, not accomplishments, not perfect plans. Presence, the simple act of being there fully, genuinely, wholeheartedly. Loss teaches this with a sharpness that lingers, but that sharpness becomes guidance. It becomes a reminder to love more deeply, to notice more intentionally, to appreciate more consciously. You cannot change what has already been lost, but you can honor it by becoming someone who understands the true value of presence. Someone who shows up. Someone who pays attention. Someone who cherishes the moments that once felt ordinary, but are now recognized as the gifts they always were. Betrayal sharpens your intuition. There is a specific kind of silence that follows betrayal. It is not the silence of confusion or sadness. It is the silence of realization. The moment when your stomach drops, your mind starts replaying everything, and a voice inside you whispers that the signs were there long before the truth finally surfaced. Betrayal hurts, but it also wakes up a part of you that had been sleeping. It sharpens your intuition in a way comfort never could. Most people think betrayal comes out of nowhere, like a sudden storm. But when you look back, you start to notice the small things you brushed aside, the uneasy feeling you ignored, the shift in tone you explained away, the excuses you accepted because confronting them felt too heavy. Human intuition is often accurate long before the mind admits it. Betrayal forces the two to sync. It brings your awareness and your instincts into alignment. There is a psychological reason this happens. The brain has a natural threat detection system called pattern recognition. It notices subtle inconsistencies, changes in behavior, and emotional mismatches long before you consciously identify them. But because you want to trust, because you want to believe the best in people, you silence those internal signals. Betrayal destroys that silence. It makes you pay attention to what your body and instincts were trying to tell you all along. The pain of betrayal comes from the collision between what you hoped someone was and who they revealed themselves to be. That gap is what breaks your heart, but it is also what trains your perception. You start remembering the moments when something felt off, the way your energy dropped around them, the way you felt drained after certain conversations, the way their words said one thing while their actions said another. Betrayal turns those memories into lessons, and those lessons change how you move through the world. You stop giving people the benefit of the doubt when the evidence says otherwise. You stop falling for potential and start observing patterns. You stop ignoring the small discomforts that show up in your chest. Instead of talking yourself out of your feelings, you begin to investigate them. That shift is not bitterness. That shift is instinct becoming wiser. What betrayal really does is refine your emotional radar. You learn to listen for tone, not just words. You learn to watch how someone treats you when no one else is watching. You learn to pay attention to how people act when you have nothing to offer them. Your intuition becomes the filter that protects your peace and your future. At first, this new level of awareness can feel like overthinking. You worry that you are too guarded or too suspicious. But over time, you notice something important. You are no longer choosing people who drain you. You are no longer giving endless chances to those who repeatedly show you their intentions. You are no longer confusing closeness with loyalty. Betrayal teaches you that proximity does not guarantee honesty, and familiarity does not guarantee safety. There is also a quieter transformation that betrayal brings. It teaches you to trust yourself again. When someone breaks your trust, you often blame yourself for not seeing it sooner. But eventually you realize that you did feel it. You did sense it. You just talked yourself out of it. Once that clicks, your confidence returns in a deeper form. You start believing your own instincts. You start valuing your own emotional signals. You become less influenced by what people say and more anchored in what you sense. And the most powerful part is this: betrayal does not harden your heart, it sharpens your awareness. You do not become colder, you become clearer. You become someone who recognizes sincerity without needing to be convinced. You become someone who sees red flags at their first appearance, not after the damage. You become someone who trusts slowly but loves deeply, because now your connections are chosen with discernment instead of hope alone. Betrayal may feel like a wound, but it becomes a compass. It points you away from what is harmful and toward what is honest. It teaches you to honor your inner voice, the one that tried to warn you long before the truth came out. And once that voice becomes your guide, you no longer fear betrayal. You see it for what it truly is, not the end of trust, but the beginning of intuition. Loneliness builds inner strength. There is a moment in loneliness that feels almost unbearable. Not the kind where you are simply alone, but the kind where you feel disconnected even when people are around. It settles into your chest like a slow ache, and for a while all you can think about is how empty everything feels. But if you sit with that emptiness long enough, something unexpected begins to happen. Loneliness starts shaping you from the inside out. It becomes a quiet forge where inner strength is built without anyone noticing. Most people try to escape loneliness the second it shows up. They look for distractions, for noise, for someone to fill the silence. But loneliness is not a punishment. It is a teacher. It strips away the people you depend on, the routines you cling to, the validation you chase, until all you are left with is yourself. And that moment, as uncomfortable as it is, becomes the place where real growth begins. At first, the silence feels threatening. Your mind starts racing. You begin questioning your decisions, your relationships, your worth. But loneliness has a way of revealing the parts of you that were hidden under constant stimulation. You begin to see your unmet needs. You recognize the areas of your life where you relied too heavily on others to feel whole. You start noticing how often you avoided your own emotions by keeping yourself busy. Loneliness takes away the distractions, and in that stillness you finally meet your own truth. There is a psychological shift happening behind the scenes. When you are surrounded by people, the brain uses external inputs to regulate your emotions. But when you face loneliness, your internal regulation system activates. This is where resilience is formed. You learn to calm yourself, to motivate yourself, to guide yourself. You begin to realize you are capable of providing the emotional support you once believed only others could give. Something else unfolds during this time. Your relationship with yourself deepens. You begin spending more time in your own thoughts, not in an overthinking way, but in a reflective way. You start asking yourself bigger questions. What do I actually want? What kind of person am I becoming? What do I need that I have been ignoring? Loneliness pushes you inward, and in that inward journey you uncover strengths you did not know you had. Slowly, you begin to change. You become more comfortable with your own company. You stop seeking approval for every decision. You stop chasing people who make you feel disposable. You no longer confuse connection with dependency. You learn to enjoy the quiet, to trust your own voice, to sit with your emotions without trying to outrun them. This is where inner strength takes shape, not as a loud declaration, but as a steady confidence rising from within you. Loneliness also teaches you the difference between being alone and feeling alone. Once you develop a stronger inner world, solitude becomes peaceful rather than frightening. Time by yourself becomes restorative instead of painful. You begin to appreciate the freedom of choosing your own pace, your own thoughts, your own space. This shift does not make you insensitive. It makes you independent. It allows you to show up to relationships as someone who wants connection, not someone who needs it to survive. And perhaps the most powerful lesson loneliness offers is clarity. You start seeing the relationships that were never meant to last. You notice who made you feel alone, even when they were next to you. You recognize what kind of people nourish your spirit and what kind drain it. Your standards evolve. Your boundaries strengthen. Your intuition becomes sharper. Loneliness teaches you what is missing so that when you find something real, you recognize it instantly. Eventually, you reach a point where you are no longer afraid of losing people, not because you do not care, but because you trust your ability to stand on your own. That kind of strength changes everything. It makes you more selective with your time, more intentional with your connections, and more protective of your peace. Loneliness may feel like a void at first, but it becomes the space where a stronger version of you is built. It shows you that you are not fragile. You are not broken. You are capable of holding yourself together even in the quietest, heaviest moments. And once you discover that strength inside you, you carry it into every part of your life. Loneliness stops being something you fear and becomes something that shaped you into someone unshakable. Struggle strengthens discipline. There is a moment in every struggle when you feel like you have nothing left to give. You wake up tired. You move through your day with that heaviness in your chest, and every task feels like you are pushing through thick mud. It is in those moments, the ones where quitting feels almost reasonable, that something crucial is happening beneath the surface. Struggle is not just testing you. It is teaching you a kind of discipline you could never develop in comfort. Most people want discipline to feel inspiring. They want motivation, energy, momentum. But discipline is born in the days when you have none of that. It grows in the frustration, the setbacks, the repeated failures, the moments where everything inside you says this is too much. Struggle breaks the illusion that discipline is about willpower alone. It reveals that discipline is actually about consistency in the middle of chaos. When life becomes difficult, the brain shifts into a state of emotional resistance. It wants to protect you by avoiding anything that feels like extra pressure. This is why struggle feels so heavy. Your mind is trying to conserve its resources. But the interesting thing is that discipline forms through this resistance, not around it. Each time you push through even a little, your brain adapts. It rewires its stress response. It begins to understand that effort under pressure is survivable. This is the foundation of mental toughness. You start noticing this shift in small ways. You show up when you do not feel like it. You push a little longer than you planned. You stay committed even when your progress feels invisible. These are the quiet victories that discipline is built on. Struggle exposes your excuses and asks you to rise above them. It demands a version of you that you have not met yet, and with every step you take, you become that version. There is a moment in every difficult season where your perspective changes. You stop saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and start saying, "What is this trying to build in me?" That change does not happen overnight. It happens after you face the same difficulty again and again and realize that you are still standing. You are not as fragile as you thought. You are not as limited as you believed. The struggle that once felt overwhelming becomes the very environment where you strengthen your discipline. Struggle also teaches you the value of delayed gratification. You begin to understand that not every effort brings instant results. Some rewards are slow. Some progress is invisible until one day it is undeniable. This is where most people quit, because they cannot see the payoff yet. But if you learn to stay steady through the slow seasons, you develop the kind of discipline that separates progress from stagnation. You learn to rely on routine, not results. You learn to trust the process even when the outcome is uncertain. Something else happens during struggle that most people overlook. Your self-respect grows. Every time you push through something hard, even in a small way, you earn back a piece of confidence you did not realize you lost. You start to see yourself as someone who follows through, someone who honors commitments, someone who does not back down just because things get uncomfortable. Discipline is not just about what you do. It is about who you become while doing it. And then there is the clarity struggle brings. When life is easy, distractions blend into the background. But when things get hard, your priorities sharpen. You start letting go of what drains you. You stop entertaining habits that sabotage your progress. You recognize the people who support your growth and the ones who slow it down. Struggle forces you to become intentional. Discipline grows naturally when your focus becomes clear. Over time, the very things that once made you feel weak become the reasons you feel strong. You realize that struggle never came to destroy you. It came to develop you. It came to teach you how to be consistent, how to be patient, how to push forward, even when the path is not smooth. You learn that discipline is not built in the moments where everything feels easy. It is built in the moments where everything feels hard and you rise anyway. Struggle may feel like an obstacle, but it is actually the training ground for the strongest parts of who you are becoming. It shapes you. It steadies you. It strengthens the discipline that will carry you through every chapter that follows. Mistakes teach accountability faster than advice. There is something almost embarrassing about realizing you messed up. That first jolt of discomfort hits you in the gut, like your body is saying this should not have happened. And yet, mistakes are the one teacher you cannot ignore. Advice can float past you. Warnings can sound wise but distant. But a mistake, your mistake, lands with weight. It forces you to stop, to reflect, to reconsider the way you move through the world. That sting you feel is the beginning of accountability. Most people think accountability is about owning up to your actions, but it goes deeper. Accountability is about becoming aware of the impact you have on yourself and on others. And mistakes, especially the ones that cost you something, bring that awareness faster than any life lesson spoken gently from the sidelines. When pain is connected to a choice you made, your mind pays attention in a way it never would through advice alone. There is a psychological mechanism behind this. The brain is wired to avoid pain and repeat what feels safe. When a mistake creates discomfort, the brain marks it as a moment worth remembering. This is why a mistake you made at 16 can still pop into your mind years later. It is not because you enjoy cringing at your past. It is because your brain stored it as a lesson you were not meant to forget. That emotional charge is what makes accountability stick. But there is another layer. Mistakes strip away illusions. They show you who you are when things do not go according to plan. They reveal how you react when you are exposed, when you cannot hide behind excuses or charm or confidence. Some people double down, deny, blame, or avoid. Others take a breath, acknowledge the truth, and start figuring out what needs to be fixed. Accountability is built in that gap between reaction and correction. The shift begins when you stop trying to defend your mistake and start trying to understand it. You realize the mistake is not the enemy, repeating it is. And that awareness creates a kind of maturity no book or mentor can force into you. You start asking different questions. Instead of why did this happen, you begin asking what did I miss or how can I prevent this? That shift alone can change the entire direction of your life. Mistakes also teach humility in a way success never will. Success can make you feel invincible. It can trick you into believing you have everything figured out. But a mistake reminds you that you are still human, still learning, still capable of misjudgment. That humility is not weakness. It is the foundation of responsibility. It allows you to look at yourself honestly without collapsing under guilt. And honesty is where accountability thrives. When you can tell yourself the truth without sugarcoating it, you gain control over your growth. You stop wasting time pretending. You stop repeating habits that sabotage your progress. You start making choices that align with the person you are trying to become, not the person you were trying to impress. Mistakes show you the parts of yourself that need work. Accountability is choosing to do that work. There is a strange comfort that comes from finally owning your mistakes. The moment you stop running from them, they lose their power to haunt you. You can look at the damage, fix what can be fixed, and learn what needs to be learned. You become someone who does not crumble under pressure, but adapts under pressure. You begin to trust yourself more because accountability builds self-respect. When you own your actions, you stop living in fear of being exposed. Over time, you realize that mistakes are not personal failures. They are feedback. They point you toward better decisions. They show you your blind spots, your weaknesses, and your strengths. They teach you boundaries, timing, preparation, communication. They teach you how easily things can fall apart when you are careless, and how much can improve when you pay attention. Advice might plant a seed, but mistakes water it. They force growth. They force understanding. They force you to level up. And as uncomfortable as that process is, it is one of the fastest ways to become someone who is not just wiser, but more grounded, more aware, and more responsible. Mistakes are not the end of your story. They are invitations to step into a better version of yourself, one choice at a time. Pain exposes hidden self-sabotage. It is strange how pain always seems to arrive at the exact moment you think you are doing everything right. Things are moving, routines look fine, you feel like you are on the right track. Then something hits you. A setback, a disappointment, a wave of emotional pressure you did not see coming. And in that moment, when everything feels raw and uncomfortable, you start noticing things you never paid attention to. Pain has a way of turning on the lights in a room you did not know you were sitting in. Suddenly you see the quiet habits, the tiny patterns, the choices you kept justifying. Pain exposes the parts of you that have been working against you. What makes self-sabotage so dangerous is how silent it is. Most of the time, people do not even realize they are doing it. They think they are protecting themselves, staying safe, moving carefully. But pain reveals what comfort hides. When something hurts, you finally feel the consequences of the shortcuts, the procrastination, the excuses, the trust you kept giving where it was not earned. Pain does not just break you. It exposes where you have been breaking yourself. There is a psychological reason for this. The mind is wired for survival, not fulfillment. It tries to avoid discomfort, even if that means limiting your growth. So you develop habits that keep you from risk. You avoid the conversation. You delay the decision. You hold back your effort. These choices feel harmless in the moment, but they stack up, and eventually, life pushes back hard enough that the pain makes you confront them. Pain forces the mind to face the truth it tried to escape. Think about it. A painful breakup can reveal how you kept ignoring red flags because you did not want to be alone. A painful failure can expose how you kept choosing the easy path instead of the committed one. A painful loss of opportunity can show you how fear kept you from taking action when you had the chance. Pain does not create the sabotage. It simply reveals the damage that was already happening quietly. There is always a moment, right in the middle of discomfort, when you catch yourself saying, "I should have seen this coming." That is not regret talking. That is awareness waking up. Pain sharpens your attention. It strips away the noise. It forces you to examine your choices without filters. You start noticing the late nights where you avoided responsibilities, the people you kept around because it felt comfortable, the habits you knew were unhealthy, but you kept telling yourself you would fix later. Pain is the alarm that says later has arrived. But there is something empowering about this. Once you see your own patterns clearly, you can change them. Accountability becomes easier when the consequences are undeniable. Pain gives you the clarity that comfort will never give you. It shows you exactly where the leak is in your ship. And even though it hurts, that clarity is a gift. Because you cannot outgrow what you refuse to confront. What makes this even more interesting is how your body reacts. When you experience emotional pain, the brain enters a heightened state of self-reflection. It becomes more aware of threats, not just outside, but inside. This is why difficult moments feel like they slow time down. Your mind is scanning everything, looking for the source, trying to protect you from repeating the same damage. Pain literally pushes you toward self-correction. And then something shifts. You start making different choices. You stop giving your energy to things that drain you. You stop calling what hurts you normal. You stop pretending you are fine when you know you are not. Pain turns avoidance into action. It turns denial into honesty. It turns fear into awareness. You begin to see how often you doubted yourself, how often you talked yourself out of opportunities, how often you stayed small because it felt safer than trying. Pain exposes the hidden patterns, but you decide what to do with the truth it reveals. You can ignore it and repeat the cycle, or you can face it and break it. And when you choose honesty over comfort, the sabotage loses its power. You stop working against yourself and finally start working for yourself. Pain may feel like punishment, but more often it is direction. It points to the exact places where healing, change, and growth are waiting for you. It shows you where your strength needs to rise. Being ignored reveals your real priorities. There is a strange kind of clarity that hits you the moment someone starts ignoring you. At first it feels personal. It stings. It makes you overthink. You replay conversations, you scan for reasons, you wonder what changed. But if you sit with that silence long enough, something important rises to the surface. Being ignored does not just reveal how someone feels about you. It reveals how you feel about yourself, what you value, what you chase, and what you have been prioritizing without even realizing it. When someone pulls their attention away from you, it forces you to look at how much of your energy you were giving them. Sometimes you do not notice how invested you are until the other person creates distance. Silence is a mirror. It shows you whether you were seeking validation, security, control, or simply connection. And the moment that mirror appears, you see your real priorities more clearly than when everything felt normal. There is a psychological reason this hits so hard. Humans are wired to respond to social cues. Attention feels like safety. Approval feels like belonging. So when those cues disappear, your nervous system reacts as if something is out of alignment. That discomfort is not just emotional, it is biological. But instead of letting the discomfort control you, you can use it to understand your true priorities. Maybe you realize you were giving too much of yourself to someone who did not value you. Maybe their silence shows you that you were prioritizing their needs above your own. Or maybe it reveals that you were relying on their attention to feel grounded or important. These realizations hurt, but they are also incredibly honest. Being ignored exposes the internal imbalance you were trying not to see. There is also a different kind of awakening that happens in these moments. When someone ignores you, your mind starts sorting through what actually matters. You begin to notice the people who do show up, the opportunities you have been overlooking, the goals you pushed aside because you were too focused on someone else. Silence rearranges your emotional priorities, whether you want it to or not. You start asking yourself questions you have not asked in a long time. Why am I chasing this? Why am I waiting for someone who is not waiting for me? Why am I tying my energy to someone who treats it like background noise? These questions create a shift. You begin to recognize the difference between wanting someone and needing their attention. You see the difference between being patient and being drained. Being ignored forces you to get brutally honest about what you value and what you have been settling for. And as frustrating as it is, Being ignored often saves you from investing even deeper into the wrong places. It stops you before you lose more time, more energy, more identity. It shows you who only values you when it is convenient for them. It reveals the relationships that require your effort to survive, and the ones that naturally hold space for you. When you stop talking to fill the silence, you start listening to your own needs. There is also a powerful emotional mechanism at play. When attention is taken away, your mind automatically assesses your priorities in order to regain balance. This is why silence can make you reevaluate your friendships, your habits, your romantic attachments, even your self-worth. It exposes what you have been ignoring within yourself. And sometimes you realize the thing hurting you the most was not their silence, but your willingness to accept it. What makes this experience transformative is how it redirects your focus. You start remembering the things you care about outside of this one person or situation. Your goals, your growth, your future, your peace. You begin to reclaim the energy you were giving away too easily. You realize that if someone can disregard you so easily, they were never meant to hold the highest place in your priority list. Being ignored may feel like rejection, but more often, it is revelation. It shows you who you were prioritizing and who deserves that place instead. It teaches you that your attention is valuable, your presence matters, and your priorities shape the quality of your life. When someone stops responding, it gives you a moment to respond to yourself. Silence is not always an insult. Sometimes it is direction. It helps you see where your energy belongs and where it never should have been. Hardship shows the difference between wants and needs. There is a moment in every difficult season when you realize life has stopped letting you hide behind comfort. Everything becomes louder. The pressure, the uncertainty, the weight of responsibility. Hardship has a way of stripping your world down to its essentials, like someone pulled the rug out from under your routines and left only the things that truly matter standing. Suddenly, the things you thought you needed do not feel as urgent, and the things you kept postponing become impossible to ignore. Hardship makes the difference between wants and needs painfully clear. When life is easy, it is almost impossible to tell the two apart. You blend desire with necessity. You convince yourself that every comfort is essential, that every distraction is harmless, that every indulgence is somehow part of your path. But hardship exposes that illusion in seconds. The moment life tightens, you see what actually keeps you steady and what was only weighing you down. There is a psychological mechanism behind this shift. When stress rises, the brain goes into prioritization mode. It becomes ruthless about conserving energy and directing focus. Anything that does not contribute to survival or stability gets pushed to the background. This is why during hard seasons, you naturally pull away from superficial relationships, unnecessary commitments, and habits that drain you. Your mind is trying to protect you by forcing clarity, and that clarity can be uncomfortable. You start noticing how many things you chased simply because they were shiny or exciting, not because they supported your growth. You realize how often you confused comfort with meaning. You see how much time you spent wanting things that did not improve your life, and how little time you spent nurturing the things that actually sustain you. Think about a moment when money was tight. Suddenly, the difference between a want and a need becomes obvious. You stop caring about new clothes or nightly takeout and focus on food, shelter, and essentials. Or think about a time when your emotional world collapsed. A breakup, a loss, a betrayal. In that moment, you stop craving approval and start craving peace. You stop seeking attention and start seeking truth. Hardship recalibrates you. It also reveals the people who matter. When life gets difficult, you quickly see who checks in, who stands by you, who shows consistency. The rest fade into the background. You stop wanting the company of people who only love the easy parts of you. What you need becomes connection, support, honesty. Hardship highlights the relationships that give you strength and the ones that were only distractions dressed as companionship. Another thing hardship exposes is how much you rely on temporary escapes. When everything feels fine, it is easy to use entertainment, habits, or mindless routines as comfort blankets. But when life becomes hard, those escapes stop helping. They lose their flavor. You cannot soothe deep pressure with shallow comfort. Hardship forces you to prioritize habits that actually build resilience rather than ones that simply help you pass time. You start noticing your real needs. Rest, not laziness. Structure, not chaos. Support, not attention. Truth, not flattery. Progress, not perfection. Hardship teaches you these distinctions without asking your permission. It pushes you to see what you were avoiding, postponing, or pretending was not important. And there is something unexpectedly empowering about that. When life removes what is unnecessary, you begin to understand what you truly value. You make choices based on stability rather than impulse. You invest your time where it matters instead of where it is convenient. You stop feeding habits that leave you empty and start cultivating ones that build strength. Over time, you start realizing that hardship did not come to take from you. It came to clarify you. It came to strip away the noise, the wants, the distractions, the illusions. It shows you that you do not need as much as you thought. You do not need every person you once clung to. You do not need every comfort you once used to cope. You do not need approval, attention, or constant excitement. What you need is purpose. What you need is alignment. What you need is resilience, direction, and honesty with yourself. Hardship brings those truths to the surface. Wants make life sweet, but needs make life sustainable. And hardship, as painful as it feels, is the teacher that draws that line with unmistakable clarity. Suffering strips away illusions. There comes a point in life where suffering stops being just something you feel and becomes something that reveals. It is almost unsettling how quickly it can peel back layers you thought were solid. You might think you know yourself, your relationships, your beliefs, your dreams. But the moment real suffering enters the room, all the illusions you have been living inside start to collapse. Not because you are weak, but because suffering forces you to face life without filters. In comfortable seasons, illusions feel harmless. You tell yourself everything is fine. You assume people mean what they say. You convince yourself that the future will unfold exactly the way you expect. You hold on to beliefs that feel good, even if they are not grounded in reality. Comfort makes illusions feel safe, but suffering comes in like a spotlight that burns through every layer of denial you built to protect yourself. There is a psychological reason this happens. When you experience suffering, the brain shifts from emotional attachment to survival-level clarity. It stops prioritizing what feels good and starts prioritizing what is real. This is why people often say they saw everything differently after going through something painful. Suffering interrupts autopilot. It forces your mind to evaluate what actually matters and what was only serving your ego, your fears, or your fantasies. One of the first illusions suffering destroys is the belief that you have control over everything. You realize that even when you plan, prepare, and do everything right, life can still hit you from angles you never saw coming. That realization can feel brutal at first, but it is also grounding. Because when you stop pretending you can control everything, you finally learn to control the only thing you truly can: your response. Suffering also exposes illusions within relationships. When things fall apart, you see who shows up and who quietly disappears. You notice who checks in, who tries to understand, who stays consistent. And you notice who only enjoyed you when you were easy to deal with. It hurts to see people clearly, but it is necessary. Suffering reveals the difference between those who care about you and those who care about the version of you that benefits them. Another illusion that suffering breaks is the one you hold about yourself. You might think you would never tolerate certain things until you do. You might think you would fall apart in certain situations until you do not. You might believe you are weak until suffering pushes you into strength you did not know you had. You discover parts of yourself that only show up when everything else is stripped away. Suffering introduces you to the real you, not the version shaped by comfort or expectations. And then there are the illusions about what matters. When you are not suffering, it is easy to get caught up chasing validation, attention, comparison, perfection, status, material comfort. But when life brings you to your knees, none of those things ease the pain. None of them deepen your resilience. None of them bring you peace. Suffering has a way of shrinking life to its essentials. Suddenly joy looks different. Connection feels deeper. Small moments become meaningful. Presence becomes priceless. Suffering also breaks the illusion that healing is simple. It shows you the parts of yourself that you buried, avoided, or labeled as unimportant. It drags unresolved wounds to the surface so you can finally acknowledge them. You may not want to face them, but suffering does not give you the luxury of pretending anymore. It forces you to confront the truths you kept trying to outrun. What is powerful is what comes after. When illusions fall away, what rises is authenticity. You stop lying to yourself about what you want. You stop pretending you are fine when you are not. You stop attaching to people who drain you. You stop chasing the idea of who you should be and start becoming who you actually are. Suffering clears the path, even if it does it violently. In the end, suffering does not just strip away illusions. It returns you to reality, to honesty, to clarity. It reveals what was fragile, what was fake, and what was never meant to stay. And even though the process feels harsh, what remains afterward is the strongest, truest version of you. Challenges build unshakable confidence. There is a certain moment in every challenge when you realize you are standing in territory you cannot fake your way through. You feel the pressure, the doubt, the heaviness in your chest that whispers maybe you are not ready. But that moment is exactly where confidence is born. Not the loud, kind people show off online. Not the polished version you see in public. Real confidence, the unshakable kind, comes from facing situations that strip away your safety nets and demand something more from you. The truth is, you do not build confidence by repeating affirmations or pretending to be fearless. You build it by surviving something that once scared you. Every challenge is a test you did not sign up for, yet somehow it ends up giving you something you did not know you needed. You walk in unsure, and you walk out different. Not because the challenge got easier, but because you did. There is a psychological process behind this shift. Whenever you face something difficult, your brain activates the stress response system. Your heart speeds up, your focus narrows, your body prepares to protect you. But when you push through instead of backing away, your brain rewires its understanding of what you can handle. It updates your internal story. This is why after you get through something hard, you find yourself thinking, if I survived that, I can survive this. That is the root of unshakable confidence. Challenges also force you to meet your limits, not in a discouraging way, but in an honest way. You begin to see the skills you lack, the discipline you avoided, the habits holding you back. And instead of pretending they are not there, you start improving them. Growth that comes from challenges is the strongest kind, because it is driven by necessity, not comfort. You are not trying to impress anyone. You are trying to become someone who can handle their own life. Think back to a time you were terrified of something. Maybe a new job, a difficult conversation, a major life shift. Before it happened, you imagined it as this impossible mountain. Then you did it. Maybe you stumbled, maybe you struggled, but you made it through. And afterward, when you look back, that mountain seemed smaller. That shrinking of fear is how confidence takes root. You earn the right to trust yourself. Challenges also reveal how capable you are when no one is watching. When everything goes wrong and you have to figure it out alone, you develop a quiet kind of strength. You learn to rely on your own judgment. You learn that panic does not help, hesitation does not help, and waiting for someone else to save you definitely does not help. You discover that you can adapt, solve, navigate, and endure. That realization is the kind of confidence that nothing and no one can take away. Another part people overlook is how challenges expose false confidence. The kind you build from comfort, compliments, or easy wins. Those things feel good, but they are fragile. The moment life hits you, they crumble. Real confidence forms when you step into situations where those illusions cannot protect you. Challenges do not care about your image. They do not care about your ego. They demand authenticity. They demand effort. They demand resilience. And when you respond with everything you have, you come out with confidence that is rooted, not borrowed. Challenges also teach you how to stay calm under pressure. The more storms you walk through, the less scared you are of clouds. You learn that fear does not mean stop. It means pay attention. You understand that discomfort is not danger. It is growth. Over time, you stop interpreting challenges as threats and start seeing them as invitations to level up. And there is another gift challenges give you: perspective. When you face something truly hard, the smaller stresses in life lose their power. You stop getting overwhelmed by minor setbacks. You stop doubting yourself over tiny mistakes. You stop letting fear make decisions for you. Confidence strengthens when you realize not everything deserves the same emotional weight. Eventually, you reach a point where challenges do not intimidate you the way they used to. You may still feel nervous, but you are no longer controlled by it. You trust your ability to learn. You trust your ability to adapt. You trust your ability to find a way even when the path is unclear. That trust is what makes your confidence unshakable. Challenges do not just build strength, they build certainty. Certainty in yourself. Certainty in your resilience. Certainty in your ability to rise, regardless of what falls apart around you. That is the kind of confidence that carries you through life, one hard-earned victory at a time. Pain teaches you to let go. There comes a point where holding on feels heavier than the actual pain you are trying to escape. You can feel it in your chest, in your body, in the way your mind keeps circling the same memories, hoping they will somehow change. But pain has a way of whispering the truth you keep avoiding. It tells you that you cannot carry everything forever, that not every person stays, that not every plan survives, that not every version of you is meant to follow you into the future. Pain teaches you to let go, not because you want to, but because holding on is slowly breaking you down. What makes letting go so difficult is that we romanticize the past. We hold tight to the idea of what something could have been, instead of accepting what it actually was. But pain cuts through that illusion with a kind of honesty you cannot ignore. When something hurts long enough, the mind starts realizing that attachment does not equal alignment. You can love something deeply and still outgrow it. You can want something desperately and still recognize that it is not right for who you are becoming. There is a psychological shift that happens when pain becomes repetitive. The brain begins to understand that the source of the hurt is something you are choosing to keep. A person, a memory, a fantasy, a belief. Pain shows you that you might be protecting something that no longer protects you. And once you see that clearly, you cannot unsee it. That clarity is the beginning of letting go. Letting go is not a moment, it is a process. It starts with noticing how often your heart tightens when you replay the past. It shows up when you realize you are carrying resentment, disappointment, or hope that has no foundation anymore. It becomes obvious when the situation drains you more than it fuels you. Pain keeps bringing these truths to the surface until you finally admit that the cost of holding on is too high. And then something interesting happens. When you begin to loosen your grip, even slightly, you feel the weight shift. You notice you can breathe a little deeper. You start experiencing moments of peace between the waves of sadness. This is your mind learning that release does not mean failure. It means choosing yourself. It means choosing reality over longing. It means choosing healing over hurt. One of the most powerful things pain reveals is how much you were trying to control. You wanted answers. You wanted closure. You wanted certainty. But letting go teaches you that you do not need every piece of the story to move forward. You do not need permission to heal. You do not need validation to walk away. Pain shows you that waiting for something outside of you to change is the very thing keeping you stuck. Letting go also exposes your strength in ways you never expected. You discover that you can stand on your own. You learn that your worth is not tied to someone staying or leaving. You realize that your life does not end when something ends. Pain forces you to grow into a stronger version of yourself by stripping away the things that kept you small or dependent or fragile. And then there is the lesson most people overlook. Pain teaches you to let go not only of people or situations, but of the stories you told yourself. The idea that you are not enough. The fear that you will never find better. The belief that you have to chase what is slipping away. Pain pushes you to release these old narratives because they no longer match the person you are becoming. With time, you begin to notice that letting go is not about losing. It is about creating space. Space for healthier connections. Space for new opportunities. Space for a clearer mind and a lighter heart. Pain shows you what no longer fits so that your life can make room for what finally will. Letting go hurts, but staying attached to what keeps hurting you is far worse. Pain does not come to punish you. It comes to teach you that freedom sometimes looks like walking away, even when your heart wants to stay. It comes to remind you that peace is not found in holding tighter. It is found in having the courage to release what weighs you down so you can rise again. Setbacks teach patience. There is a moment during every setback when you feel that sharp mix of frustration and disbelief. You think to yourself, this should not be happening, or I was finally getting somewhere. It is that emotional punch that throws you off balance and forces you to pause. But inside that unwanted pause lies one of the most underrated lessons life teaches. Setbacks are not just obstacles. They are instructors in patience, shaping you in ways success never could. Most people think patience is simply waiting calmly, like it is some peaceful state of mind. But patience is not calm at first. Patience is built in the irritation, the delays, the unexpected detours that feel like they are ruining your plans. Patience is what develops when you have no choice but to move slower than you wanted. It is not a personality trait. It is a survival skill, sharpened every time something knocks you off your timeline. What makes setbacks so effective at teaching patience is the way they confront your expectations. You picture progress happening in a straight line. You imagine every effort paying off exactly when it should. But setbacks break that fantasy. They force you to rewrite the timeline in your mind. They show you that growth is never instant and that pushing harder does not always speed things up. Sometimes life slows you down to strengthen you. There is a psychological mechanism behind this. When plans collapse or obstacles show up, your brain enters a state of cognitive dissonance. You believe the path would go one way, but reality went another. That mental tension is uncomfortable, but it is also where patience starts forming. Your mind begins adjusting, learning to tolerate uncertainty, learning to release the illusion of perfect timing. Setbacks stretch your emotional capacity until patience becomes the only way forward. You notice this shift most clearly in your reactions. Early on, every delay feels like a disaster. You overthink, you panic, you question everything. But after enough setbacks, something changes. You stop spiraling as quickly. You stop expecting everything to happen instantly. You learn to take a breath before you respond. That pause is patience being born. It is the gap between emotion and action that setbacks carve into you. Setbacks also teach you that rushing rarely leads to better results. You start seeing how impatience makes you sloppy, reactive, careless. You realize how many mistakes came from acting too fast, too worried, too desperate. When a setback forces you to slow down, you gain clarity you could not access before. You begin choosing more intentionally, thinking more deeply, preparing more thoroughly. Patience is not passiveness, it is precision. Another reason setbacks build patience is because they expose how little control you actually have. You can control effort, but not timing. You can control preparation, but not opportunity. You can control your choices, but not every outcome. Setbacks teach you to stop fighting the uncontrollable parts of life and start mastering the parts you can influence. Patience grows when you stop resisting reality and start working with it. There is also something powerful in how setbacks reveal your resilience. When everything goes wrong and you still keep moving, even slowly, you begin to trust yourself differently. You learn that progress is not always visible. Sometimes it is happening silently while you are forced to wait. That realization builds patience because you finally understand that slow does not mean stuck and delayed does not mean denied. Setbacks also refine your priorities. When you are forced to wait, you start seeing what actually matters and what you were only rushing toward out of ego, pressure, or comparison. Patience becomes easier when your path is driven by intention instead of impulse. You stop chasing everything at once and start focusing on what truly deserves your time. And then there is the unexpected blessing setbacks bring. They show you the value of timing you cannot control. You look back later and realize that what felt like a delay was actually protection, preparation, or redirection. You see that if things had happened earlier, you would not have been ready. That understanding is what deepens patience. It teaches you to trust the pacing of your life instead of fighting it. Over time, you start responding to setbacks differently. Not with panic, but with perspective. You understand that being slowed down does not mean you failed. It means you are learning the emotional endurance required for real growth. Patience stops feeling like a burden and starts feeling like wisdom. Setbacks do not just interrupt your path. They strengthen your character. They build the kind of patience that keeps you grounded when life gets unpredictable. And once you learn that, every delay becomes less of a punishment and more of a reminder that your journey is still unfolding, one steady step at a time. Frustration builds problem-solving skills. There is something almost electric about frustration. That moment when nothing works the way it should, when every attempt feels like it hits the exact same wall, when you feel your body tighten and your thoughts scatter. It feels like pressure, like heat, like you are seconds away from giving up or exploding. But hidden inside, that feeling is a force that quietly sharpens your mind more than calm moments ever could. Frustration can feel like the enemy, but it is actually the spark that turns your brain into a problem-solving machine. What people rarely talk about is how frustration pulls you out of autopilot. Most of the time, you run on routines, habits, patterns you already know. You do things the way you have always done them because it is easy. But frustration interrupts that comfort. It breaks the script. It forces you to stop and rethink. It is one of the few emotions strong enough to jolt you into a higher level of focus. There is a psychological reason for this. When you get frustrated, your brain releases a mix of stress hormones that increase alertness, sharpen concentration, and boost your ability to analyze. It might feel overwhelming, but your mind is actually becoming more capable in that moment. This is why breakthroughs often happen right after your most irritated attempts. Your brain is being pushed into a new gear. Frustration also exposes the limits of your current strategy. It shows you that the easy way is not working. It shows you that your first idea was not the best idea, and instead of letting you settle for a half answer, frustration pushes you to look deeper, to experiment, to question everything. It teaches you that problem solving is rarely about instant solutions. It is about endurance, creativity, and adaptability. Think about every skill you ever improved. At the beginning, everything feels awkward. You fail repeatedly. You get annoyed. You make mistakes you feel you should not be making. But every time you push through that frustration, your brain rewires itself. There is a process called neuroplasticity, the brain reorganizing and strengthening new pathways, and it is triggered heavily during challenging, frustrating experiences. You are literally becoming smarter while you feel like you are falling apart. Frustration teaches you to break problems down. When the overall issue feels too big, frustration forces you to step back and look at smaller pieces. You start asking better questions. What part of this is actually stopping me? What have I not tried? What am I assuming that might not be true? These questions are the foundation of problem solving, and frustration is what pulls them out of you. It also teaches persistence. When you feel frustrated but still choose to continue, you build the mental muscle that separates people who overcome challenges from those who avoid them. You learn that solutions do not appear just because you want them to. They appear because you stayed long enough to find them. Frustration strengthens that staying power. And one of the most overlooked gifts of frustration is the way it resets your perspective. When something is not working, you start exploring angles you would never have considered if things went smoothly. Many of the best solutions in life come from the simple fact that frustration forced you to stop relying on your first idea and look for your best idea. There is also a deeper emotional lesson here. Frustration teaches you that problems do not shrink just because you wish they would. They shrink when you grow, when you become more patient, more analytical, more flexible, more strategic. Frustration does not just teach problem solving. It teaches self-development. It teaches responsibility for your own progress. Over time, you start to notice the shift. Instead of panicking when something goes wrong, you take a breath. You observe, you adjust. You approach problems with curiosity instead of anger. You trust your ability to figure things out because you have proven it to yourself during difficult moments. That confidence is something frustration built. And slowly, frustration stops feeling like a dead end and starts feeling like an invitation. A sign that something important is about to be learned. A sign that you are on the edge of growth. Because every challenge that frustrates you is sharpening your mind, refining your skills, and preparing you for bigger obstacles ahead. Frustration is not there to break you. It is there to build the version of you who knows how to solve what used to overwhelm you. Failure shows you what you truly care about. It is strange how clearly life speaks when something you wanted falls apart. Not in the moment of failure, because that moment feels like fog. It feels heavy, confusing, disappointing. But once that initial wave settles, failure has a way of shining a light on the parts of your life that actually matter to you. It is almost like life removes everything that was half-hearted so you can finally see what your heart was fully invested in. Most people think failure just means you were not good enough or that you made the wrong choice. But failure has a second layer, the one nobody talks about. It shows you what you were willing to fight for. It reveals what you cared about enough to try in the first place. You do not put effort, time, or emotion into something you feel nothing for. Failure only hurts when something genuinely mattered to you. And that pain is information. Think about it. When you fail at something you never cared about, you barely notice. You shrug it off and move on. But when you fail at something that felt meaningful, something you imagined yourself succeeding in, that disappointment sits in your chest. You replay it. You feel the sting. That reaction tells you more about your values than success ever could. Psychologists call this value activation. Your emotional response is like a compass pointing toward what actually holds importance in your life. Failure lights up that internal map. It says this mattered to you, and you learn that only because it did not work out the way you hoped. Failure also strips away obligations and expectations. Sometimes you chase goals that were never yours in the first place. Maybe it was pressure from other people, or the desire to impress, or the thought that you needed to prove something. But when you fail at a path you were never truly aligned with, the relief speaks louder than the disappointment. That relief is your mind saying thank you for letting this go. You did not want it anyway. On the other hand, if failure leaves you wanting to try again, that is a sign. There is something in that dream that is tied to your identity, something that feels like part of your story. Failure exposes that deeper connection. You learn that you can lose momentum without losing desire. And desire is the real indicator of what your life is pulling you toward. There is also a biological reason failure clarifies what you care about. When you fail, your brain evaluates the loss using emotional weighting. If the goal was tied to purpose, creativity, growth, or a personal sense of meaning, the emotional system reacts more intensely. That intensity is not punishment. It is guidance. Your brain is telling you this mattered. Pay attention to it. Failure also forces you to confront one question that success hides: why does this matter to me? When everything is going well, you rarely stop and think about your reasons. But failure makes you reflect. It makes you dig deeper. It makes you honest. Most people discover their most authentic motivation after something falls apart, not while everything is going smoothly. And there is something powerful in the way failure reveals your resilience towards certain goals. If something breaks you, and you never want to return to it, it probably was not yours to hold. But if something breaks you, and you still feel pulled back toward it, that is passion. That is alignment. That is a piece of you calling out. Failure exposes the difference between what you liked and what you loved. Another thing failure reveals is what you are willing to sacrifice for. Some dreams demand time, energy, patience, money, or a long climb through discouragement. Failure makes you ask yourself whether the sacrifice is still worth it. If the answer is yes, then you have discovered something core to who you are. If the answer is no, failure saved you years of forcing yourself down the wrong direction. Over time, failure becomes less of a judgment and more of a filter. It removes the distractions, the superficial goals, the borrowed dreams. It highlights the pursuits that wake you up inside. It teaches you to follow what pulls you, not what pressures you. And when you look back, you realize something surprising. Failure did not just show you what you were bad at. It showed you what you truly cared about. It revealed the paths worth returning to, the passions worth nurturing, the stories worth continuing. Failure does not take meaning from your life. It reveals where meaning already lives. Pain pushes you out of comfort zones. There comes a moment in life when the familiar starts feeling too tight, like clothes you have outgrown but never bothered to replace. You convince yourself everything is fine, that you can stay exactly where you are, that the comfort you know is better than the unknown stretching beyond it. But then pain shows up, not to punish you, but to push you. Pain is the alarm clock your life uses when you have stayed still for too long. Nobody likes admitting this, but comfort is addictive. It gives you the illusion of safety. It gives you routines that feel predictable. It gives you people and places and habits that do not challenge you. And for a while, that feels good. But growth does not happen in what feels good. Growth happens when something hurts enough to make you move. Pain steps in when you would rather stay the same. You can see this pattern everywhere. People do not leave their draining jobs until the stress becomes unbearable. They do not walk away from hollow relationships until the loneliness inside that relationship becomes louder than the fear of being alone. They do not change their habits until the consequences hit a level they can no longer ignore. Pain forces decisions that comfort delays. There is a psychological mechanism behind this. The human brain is wired to conserve energy. Familiar routines use less mental effort, so your brain naturally clings to them. Breaking out of a comfort zone demands change, And change demands energy. Pain tips the scale. It overwhelms the desire to conserve energy by signaling that staying the same is now more dangerous than evolving. Pain creates urgency, and that urgency is what pushes you into parts of yourself you have not explored yet. When something hurts, your perspective sharpens. You start asking better questions. You start noticing things you ignored. You start taking action you postponed for months or even years. Pain strips away the excuses that comfort protects. You cannot stay asleep in your own life when something within you keeps demanding you wake up. Most of your breakthroughs come after moments of discomfort. Think about the times you made your boldest decisions. Rarely were they made when everything felt smooth. They were made when something inside you finally snapped and said enough. That snap is the beginning of growth. It is the moment your comfort zone cracks open and gives you space to expand. Pain also teaches you that the boundary you thought was the edge of your ability was actually just the edge of your habit. You discover new strengths not by feeling good, but by being stretched. When pain pushes you, you learn that you can handle more than you believed. Your tolerance for challenge grows. Your confidence grows. You build a version of yourself you never would have met if life had stayed easy. There is also something powerful about the clarity pain brings. Comfort clouds judgment. It makes you settle. It makes you overlook red flags. It makes you believe you have more time than you really do. But pain clears the fog. Suddenly, you can see what is wrong, what needs to change, what you have been avoiding. Pain reveals truths comfort hides. And there is a strange irony here. People do everything to avoid pain, but pain is often the very thing that saves them. It saves them from staying small. It saves them from staying silent. It saves them from a life lived halfway. Pain is not the enemy of comfort. Pain is the reminder that comfort was holding you back. One of the most life-changing realizations is recognizing the difference between pain that breaks you and pain that transforms you. Breaking pain is usually tied to harm, but transformative pain is tied to growth. It is the pain you feel when you are shedding a version of yourself that no longer fits. It is the discomfort of stepping beyond what is familiar into what is possible. As you move through life, you start seeing pain differently. You stop running from it and start listening to it. You recognize when it is telling you that your life is too small for who you are becoming. Pain becomes a guide, not a threat. It becomes that force that pushes you to evolve, to take risks, to choose courage over comfort. Pain does not push you out of your comfort zone to hurt you. It pushes you because life knows you are capable of more than staying where you are. Discomfort forces self-reflection. There is something about discomfort that grabs you in a way comfort never will. It is that uneasy feeling in your chest, that quiet tension in your mind, that sense that something is off even if you cannot explain it yet. Discomfort is not loud, but it is persistent. It sits with you. It follows you. It interrupts the places you once felt relaxed, and that is exactly why it becomes the turning point for honest self-reflection. Most people avoid discomfort because it feels like a warning signal. You assume something is wrong. You assume you should run from it or distract yourself or bury it under routine. But discomfort is not danger. Discomfort is a message. It is life tapping you on the shoulder, saying, "Pay attention. Something inside you is evolving, and you cannot ignore it anymore." Discomfort shows up most clearly when your actions no longer match your values. There is a psychological term for this: cognitive dissonance. and it simply means your brain senses a mismatch between who you are and what you are doing. That mismatch triggers emotional discomfort. It is your inner world telling you to stop pretending everything is fine and look deeper. Think about the moments discomfort strikes hardest. When you stay in a relationship that drained you long before you admitted it. When you show up to a job that does not connect to the future you want. When you keep repeating habits that sabotage your progress. Discomfort rises in those moments because you know, on some level, you deserve more. That tension becomes the spark for self-reflection. Discomfort also forces you to slow down. You cannot outrun that uneasy feeling. It catches up. It makes you pause. It makes you think about choices you have been avoiding. In comfort, you move on autopilot, but in discomfort, you become intentional. You start examining your patterns, your beliefs, your behaviors. You start asking yourself questions you never ask when everything feels easy. The truth is that most growth begins with questions you do not want to ask. Why am I still doing this? Why do I tolerate this? Why does this bother me so much? Why am I pretending I am okay? Discomfort pushes those questions to the surface. It refuses to let you look away. There is a reason therapists and psychologists say discomfort is a sign of emotional awakening. It is the moment your inner self stops accepting the version of your life that no longer fits. It is the signal that something deeper in you wants to shift. Discomfort is not the problem. Discomfort is the indicator that a problem exists. Another reason discomfort leads to self-reflection is because it strips away denial. When something feels off day after day, you can no longer lie to yourself. You start to see patterns you ignored. You start to notice how certain situations drain your energy. You start recognizing how long you have been settling. Discomfort breaks the illusions that comfort protects. And as uncomfortable as it feels, this is where transformation begins. Discomfort creates a space where honesty becomes unavoidable. You begin to tell yourself the truth, even when it hurts. You admit what is not working. You admit what you want to change. You admit what you have outgrown. That honesty becomes the foundation of real self-awareness. Discomfort also challenges your identity. It makes you question whether the version of you have been living as is actually the version of you want to become. You begin to see the gap between who you are and who you could be. And even though that gap feels intimidating, it also feels motivating. Discomfort pushes you to bridge that distance. Over time, you start noticing something unexpected. Discomfort becomes less threatening and more clarifying. You stop interpreting it as a sign that you are failing and start seeing it as a sign that you are evolving. It becomes the emotional nudge that tells you change is overdue. It becomes a mirror that reflects the truth you cannot ignore. And there is a quiet strength in learning to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. When you give yourself a moment to feel it, to understand it, to explore it, you unlock insights that comfort could never offer you. You discover what matters to you. You discover what needs to change. You discover the parts of yourself you abandoned or ignored. In the end, discomfort does not show up to break you. It shows up to wake you. It is the emotional signal that something deeper inside you is ready to be acknowledged, understood, and transformed. Discomfort forces self-reflection because it refuses to let you stay the same. It pushes you to grow into the person you were always meant to become. Trauma builds empathy for others. There is a moment after you have been through something heavy when you look at people differently. Not because you suddenly became wiser or stronger, but because you now understand a kind of pain you never noticed before. Trauma changes the way you read faces, the way you interpret silence, the way you pay attention to people who seem fine on the surface. It rewires your sensitivity. It makes you notice things others overlook. And without realizing it, trauma becomes the doorway to a deeper kind of empathy. Most people think empathy is simply feeling bad for someone. But real empathy is born from recognition. You recognize the fear in someone else because you have felt it. You recognize the sadness behind a smile because you once wore the same mask. Trauma gives you emotional X-ray vision. You start to see the layers behind people instead of judging the behavior on the surface. There is a psychological reason for this shift. When you go through a traumatic experience, your brain becomes more attuned to emotional cues. It starts scanning for danger, yes, but it also becomes more aware of vulnerability in others. That heightened awareness does not fade when safety returns. It becomes part of how you interact with the world. Trauma sharpens your ability to sense distress that is not spoken out loud. You start understanding the quiet struggles, the long pauses before someone answers, the way a laugh carries tension underneath it, the way someone pulls back slightly when a topic gets too close. Before your own trauma, these signals were invisible. After trauma, they feel obvious. Not because you are analyzing people, but because your heart recognizes something familiar. And there is something powerful about how trauma softens you. It breaks you open in ways you never wanted. But in that breaking, you learn gentleness. You learn compassion. You learn patience. You learn that people carry stories they never talk about. Trauma humbles you. It reminds you that life can change quickly, that people can hurt quietly, that strength is not always loud. Some of the most empathetic people you will ever meet are the ones who have been through the darkest experiences. They know what it feels like to reach out for help and feel unheard. They know what it feels like to smile while breaking inside. They know what it feels like to want support but fear burdening others. That understanding becomes the foundation of their empathy. They treat others with the care they wish someone had shown them during their own pain. Trauma also teaches you to listen differently. You no longer rush conversations. You no longer assume you understand someone after a few words. You give people space. You allow them to process. You allow them to feel. You know that healing is not linear because yours was not, so you do not push. You do not judge. You simply hold space in a way only someone who has been through something heavy can. There is a deeper emotional shift too. Trauma shows you the difference between sympathy and presence. Sympathy says, I feel bad for you. Presence says, I am here with you through this. Trauma graduates you into presence. You stop trying to fix people and start supporting them. You stop offering empty encouragement and start offering genuine understanding. Your empathy becomes grounded, mature, real. Another gift trauma brings is gratitude for the small kindnesses. You appreciate gentleness in people. You notice when someone speaks softly. You value moments of honesty. And because you learned the healing power of these small things, you begin offering them to others without even realizing it. Your empathy grows in the little moments, not just the big ones. And over time, trauma changes the stories you tell yourself about other people. You stop assuming coldness means they do not care. You stop assuming anger means they are cruel. You stop assuming distance means they dislike you. Instead, you start wondering what they might be carrying. You start seeing pain as a possibility instead of taking everything personally. That shift alone raises your empathy to a level that many never reach. Trauma does not make you emotionally perfect, but it makes you emotionally aware. It creates a depth of understanding that only lived experience can teach. You learn that people are often kinder than they look and hurting more than they say. And in that understanding, empathy becomes not just something you feel, but something you live. Trauma may break you open, but it also expands your capacity to love, to understand, and to support others in ways you never could have if life had always been gentle. Conflict reveals communication flaws. There is a moment during any conflict when everything suddenly feels louder. Your heartbeat, your thoughts, your emotions, all climbing on top of each other, fighting for space. And in that heat, you start to realize something uncomfortable. The argument is not just about what is happening right now. It is about all the things that were never said clearly, all the assumptions that were never corrected, all the feelings that were never expressed. Conflict does not create communication flaws. It exposes the ones that were already there. Most people hate conflict because it feels messy and unpredictable. You can feel misunderstood in seconds. You can feel attacked, even when no one meant to attack you. But conflict is often the only moment when the truth breaks through the surface. It is the spotlight that reveals where communication has been weak, unclear, passive, or avoided. Conflict has a way of magnifying what you normally ignore. Maybe you talk around the problem instead of addressing it directly. Maybe you soften your words so much that your real meaning gets lost. Maybe you shut down when things get emotional. Maybe you listen only to respond instead of listening to understand. These habits rarely show themselves during calm moments. But the second tension rises, they come out in full force. There is a psychological explanation for this. During conflict, your brain shifts into a defensive state. You move from logical thinking into emotional survival mode, and in that state, your communication defaults to your deepest habits. If your habit is avoiding discomfort, you withdraw. If your habit is over-explaining, you ramble. If your habit is suppressing emotion, you speak with a coldness you do not intend. Conflict reveals your communication patterns with painful accuracy. You can see this most clearly in the misunderstandings that rise during arguments. Someone says something simple, yet you hear something completely different. They think they are being clear, but you interpret it through your fears, your insecurities, your past experiences. That gap between intention and interpretation is the flaw conflict exposes. It shows you that communication is not about what you say. It is about what the other person receives. Conflict also highlights where clarity has been missing. Sometimes you assume people should just know how you feel. You assume they should know your boundaries without you ever expressing them. You assume they should understand your needs without you explaining them. Then conflict arrives and that assumption collapses. The truth shows up. They did not know. They could not know, because you never said it out loud. There is also the issue of unresolved feelings. Every conflict draws them out. You think you are arguing about one moment, but really you are arguing about a buildup of little moments you never addressed. Conflict becomes the emotional overflow of everything you kept quiet about. And even though it feels chaotic, that overflow is revealing the communication you avoided. One of the most eye-opening parts of conflict is the way it mirrors your own behavior back to you. If you interrupt constantly, conflict makes it obvious. If you shut down, conflict makes the silence feel heavier. If you get defensive instantly, Conflict puts that defensiveness on full display. You cannot hide from yourself in the middle of an argument. Conflict makes your communication style impossible to ignore. But here is the deeper truth. Conflict is not the enemy. Poor communication is. Conflict is the flashlight showing you exactly where the repairs are needed. It reveals the moments you need to be clearer, calmer, more honest, more patient. It reveals the parts of yourself you need to strengthen if you want healthier connections. You might not like what conflict shows you, but the clarity it brings is priceless. It shows you where you need to grow in expressing yourself. It shows you where others need more explanation, more reassurance, or more directness. It shows you where assumptions have been replacing real conversation. It shows you where silence has been hurting your relationships more than honesty ever could. Over time, you begin to understand the gift conflict brings. It is the moment that forces awareness. It pushes you to communicate with more intention instead of reacting on autopilot. It teaches you to pause before speaking, to check your tone, to choose your words with care. It teaches you that understanding is built, not assumed. Conflict does not ruin communication. It reveals its weaknesses so you can build something stronger. It shows you the cracks so you can repair them. It shows you the truth so you can finally learn to speak it. Regret teaches the importance of action. There is a specific kind of silence that hits you when regret shows up. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is that quiet heaviness that lives in the back of your mind, reminding you of the chances you did not take, the words you never said, the steps you kept postponing because you thought you had more time. Regret is the emotion that arrives too late to change the past, but right on time to change the future. And once you feel it deeply enough, it teaches you something life-changing. Action is always more important than hesitation. Regret is one of the sharpest teachers because it does not yell. It whispers. It repeats the same thought over and over. You could have tried. You could have moved. You could have spoken. You could have done something. It is that repetition that wakes you up. It is the emotional echo of all the opportunities you talked yourself out of. Most people think fear is what stops them, but it is hesitation that destroys more dreams than fear ever will. Fear at least feels honest. Hesitation disguises itself as logic or timing or preparation. You tell yourself you are not ready, or you will start next week, or you need more clarity. But deep down, you know the truth. You are waiting for certainty in a world that never gives any. Regret exposes that. It pulls back the curtain and shows you that inaction is still a choice, and it is often the choice that hurts the most. Psychologists call this the negativity bias of missed opportunity. Your brain feels more pain from something you did not do than something you did and failed at. Because at least when you try, you gain information. When you do nothing, you are left with imagination, and imagination is far more punishing. Regret also teaches you that time is not as generous as you pretend it is. You convince yourself you can delay your dreams. You convince yourself there will be a better moment. But regret teaches you that waiting rarely creates better timing. It only creates more distance between you and the version of yourself you want to become. Regret forces you to confront the truth that one day becomes never if you are not careful. And there is another layer people do not usually think about. Regret teaches you the emotional cost of staying safe. You think avoiding risk protects you, but it actually traps you. You stay in comfort zones that slowly shrink around you. You stay in routines that drain you. You stay silent in moments you wish you had spoken up. Regret shows you that safety is not always safe. Sometimes it is just familiar. The strange thing is that regret does not come from the big dramatic life events nearly as often as people think. It comes from the small steps you avoided, the conversation you avoided because it felt awkward, the opportunity you passed on because you did not feel confident enough, the tiny moment when you had a spark of courage and talked yourself out of it within seconds. Those are the regrets that pile up quietly and eventually become loud enough to change you. Regret also rearranges your priorities. When you feel that sting, even once, you begin to understand what actually matters to you. You realize which dreams are worth chasing, which relationships deserve effort, which risks you are tired of avoiding. Regret acts like a filter, stripping away the excuses and revealing the desires you can no longer ignore. Over time, regret teaches you something surprising. Action does not guarantee satisfaction, but inaction guarantees regret. You learn that taking a step, even a small one, brings clarity, momentum, possibility. You learn that mistakes can be corrected, but missed chances cannot be reclaimed. You learn that trying and failing hurts far less than wondering what if for the rest of your life. There is something freeing about accepting this lesson. You stop waiting for perfect timing. You stop negotiating with your own fear. You stop assuming you have endless chances. Instead, you start choosing courage a little more often. You start treating opportunities with the urgency they deserve. You start realizing that your future depends far more on the actions you take than the thoughts you have. Regret does not show up to punish you. It shows up to push you. It teaches you that the pain of inaction lasts far longer than the discomfort of trying. And once you understand that deeply, you begin living with more intention, more boldness, and more respect for the time you still have. Pain teaches the value of boundaries. It is strange how you can go years without setting boundaries and never realize the cost until pain finally forces you to see it. You let things slide. You allow people to take a little more of your time, your energy, your patience. You convince yourself you are being kind or flexible or easy to get along with. But pain steps in eventually and shows you the truth. Every time you avoid setting a boundary, you silently approve your own exhaustion. Pain is the teacher that turns discomfort into clarity. It is only when someone crosses a line too many times that you realize the line should have never been that close in the first place. You notice how drained you feel after certain conversations. You notice how heavy your chest gets when someone messages you. You notice how you are constantly explaining yourself, constantly making excuses, constantly trying to manage someone else's emotions while ignoring your own. Pain highlights all of that. It holds up a mirror and asks you why you keep allowing what hurts you. And the answer is almost always the same. You thought being easygoing would make people value you. You thought saying yes would make you likable. You thought avoiding conflict would keep the peace. But pain teaches what comfort never could. Without boundaries, people do not value you more. They expect more. They take more. And eventually, they stop noticing the effort you are burning yourself out to give. Psychologists explain this as the problem of inconsistent emotional cost. When your actions do not match your limits, your brain experiences internal conflict. You feel resentment because you are giving more than you want to, but guilt when you try to say no. Pain appears to resolve that conflict. It makes the discomfort of speaking up feel smaller than the suffering of staying silent. The moment you understand that shift, everything changes. You realize boundaries are not meant to control others. They are meant to protect the parts of you that keep getting bruised. They protect your time. They protect your peace. They protect your self-respect. Pain teaches you that boundaries are not acts of selfishness. They are acts of self-preservation. Think about the moments that finally pushed you to set a boundary. It was not when someone made a tiny request. It was when you had already said yes 100 times and your soul felt tired. It was when you realized someone only reached out when they needed something. It was when you noticed you were the emotional support for people who never supported you back. Pain takes those repeated experiences and turns them into non-negotiable truths. You stop pretending you are okay with what you are not okay with. Pain also exposes the people who never respected your boundaries in the first place. The moment you pull back, the moment you say no, the moment you stop overgiving, their reaction tells you everything. People who care about you adjust. People who only cared about the access you gave them get angry, distant, or manipulative. Pain shows you that boundaries do not ruin healthy relationships. They reveal unhealthy ones. And then something interesting happens. Once you set a boundary, and you survive the discomfort of it, you feel stronger. You feel lighter. You feel a sense of control you forgot you were allowed to have. Pain teaches you that every boundary is a door you build to protect your inner world. The right people knock. The wrong people try to break it down, and you finally learn the difference. Boundaries also create a healthier version of you. One who no longer says yes out of fear. One who no longer sacrifices peace for approval. One who no longer measures their worth by how much they can tolerate. Pain strips away the illusion that love means limitless giving. It teaches you that real love, whether from others or yourself, has structure. It has respect. It has lines that protect the relationship instead of draining it. Pain is harsh, but it is honest. And once it teaches you the value of boundaries, you start choosing relationships that nourish you instead of depleting you. You start protecting your time with confidence instead of guilt. You start honoring your limits as much as your strengths. And that shift changes everything. Hard times reveal unrealistic expectations. It is wild how quickly hard times expose the expectations you did not even realize you were carrying. You move through life with this quiet belief that things should unfold in a certain way. People should show up. Plans should work out. Effort should be rewarded. Life should have some kind of clear pattern that makes sense. But the moment life gets heavy, those unspoken expectations start cracking. Hard times have a way of stripping the fantasy from reality and forcing you to see what is actually reasonable and what was never realistic in the first place. You learn this the hard way. You expect loyalty, and suddenly you notice who disappears. You expect progress, and suddenly everything stalls. You expect things to be fair, and life reminds you it never promised fairness, only possibility. Hard times reveal how much of your frustration comes not just from the situation itself, but from the gap between what you thought life should be and what it actually is. It is like when a storm hits your home. You do not really notice the weak spots in the roof until the rain starts pouring through. Hard times are that storm. They show you where your expectations were too fragile to survive reality. Maybe you believed people would treat you the way you treat them. Maybe you assumed that giving your best meant things would turn out your way. Maybe you thought you could avoid failure if you planned well enough. Those expectations feel comforting when life is smooth, but the moment things collapse, they expose themselves for what they are: illusions. Psychologists talk about something called the expectation gap. It is the emotional distance between what you imagined and what actually happens. The bigger the gap, the more painful the experience. Hard times do not just hurt because they are difficult. They hurt because they shatter the version of the world you were holding in your mind. And that shattering is what wakes you up. You start realizing that most of your disappointment was built on unrealistic assumptions. You expected people to read your mind. You expected circumstances to bend to your timeline. You expected linear growth in a world that moves in cycles. You expected control in places where you only ever had influence. Hard times reveal all of that, brutally but honestly. The thing about unrealistic expectations is that they feel so reasonable until life pushes back. You think wanting effort, consistency, support, or success on a certain schedule is normal, but hard times introduce you to the truth. People have limits. Life has chaos. Growth has seasons. And nothing happens simply because you feel you deserve it. Hard times make you recalibrate. You stop expecting perfection from others and from yourself. You stop assuming everything should work on the first try. You stop believing every relationship will last, every opportunity will remain, or every plan will unfold cleanly. And when you let go of those unrealistic expectations, something unexpected happens. You become more grounded, more patient, more adaptable. You learn to appreciate commitment instead of perfection. You learn to value effort instead of predictability. You learn to respect the long game instead of demanding instant results. Hard times teach you that reality is not here to meet your expectations. It is here to shape you into someone who can handle what reality requires. There is also a deeper lesson hiding inside this. Hard times reveal that expecting life to always feel good is the quickest route to misery. You grow more from struggle than comfort. You learn more from failure than success. You evolve more from uncertainty than routine. And once you accept that, you stop treating difficulty as punishment. You start treating it as information. Hard times clarify who you can depend on. They clarify what actually matters. They clarify where you have been lying to yourself. They clarify which dreams are real and which ones were just fantasies you clung to because they felt safe. Hard times wipe the lens clean and let you see your life without filters. And even though it hurts, that honesty is freeing. Unrealistic expectations suffocate you without you even noticing. Hard times break them open. They force you to rebuild your expectations on something sturdier, something real, something that can survive life as it is, not as you wish it would be. And once you start living with realistic expectations, you stop breaking under pressure. You bend, you adapt, you grow. Hard times stop feeling like the end of the world and start feeling like the beginning of wisdom. Pain makes you appreciate small joys. There is a strange clarity that pain brings, a way it sharpens your senses to the little things most people take for granted. You do not notice it when life is smooth. A warm cup of coffee, a laugh with a friend, a quiet evening at home. These moments slip by unnoticed because nothing is threatening them. But when pain arrives, whether it is loss, disappointment, or heartbreak, suddenly the world feels heavier and the small joys feel brighter. Pain teaches you to notice what you once ignored. At first, the intensity of pain can overwhelm you. It grabs your attention and refuses to let go. It exposes how fragile things really are. You notice how quickly circumstances can change, how fleeting moments are, how little control you actually have over what happens to you. And in that awareness, something shifts. You start to cling differently, not to people or things, but to experiences, sensations, and moments that are often dismissed as ordinary. Pain exposes the contrast. When everything hurts, even the simplest comforts become sacred. You find yourself noticing sunlight through the window, the sound of birds in the morning, the rhythm of your own breathing. You start recognizing that joy does not have to be monumental to be meaningful. A text from a loved one, a shared smile, a quiet walk, they all gain weight because they exist in a world that suddenly feels unpredictable and fragile. There is a psychological reason for this. Neuroscience shows that experiences tied to strong emotions, especially negative ones, heighten your sensitivity to future stimuli. When you endure pain, your brain begins to assign more value to positive, even minor, experiences. This is why survivors often describe an almost childlike appreciation for things they once overlooked. Pain rewires perception so that joy becomes more immediate, more vivid, and more necessary. Think about someone who has experienced illness or loss. A simple hug can feel like salvation. A day without stress or conflict can feel miraculous. Pain teaches you that the ordinary moments you overlooked were never truly ordinary. They were just unnoticed. The intensity of suffering highlights their worth. You start noticing the textures, the colors, the emotions that are easy to ignore when life is easy. Pain also teaches patience and presence. When you hurt, you cannot always rush through experiences or distract yourself. You are forced to inhabit the moment, to feel it fully, and in doing so, you begin to see what is around you more clearly. You notice the laughter in conversations that previously felt mundane. You notice kindness in gestures that previously felt automatic. You notice beauty in routines that previously felt repetitive. Pain slows you down enough to appreciate what is real. Another layer is gratitude. Pain often brings humility. You realize how much you take for granted: health, stability, love, time, freedom. Once these things are threatened, even the smallest occurrences become gifts. Pain creates a sensitivity to what you once considered trivial because it has shown you how quickly they can be taken away. Every simple pleasure becomes a reminder that life, however fleeting, is worth savoring. There is also a resilience that emerges. When you endure hardship, the small joys are no longer just fleeting. They are anchors. They remind you that happiness does not have to be constant to matter. It reminds you that life contains richness even in its imperfections. Pain teaches you that you do not need grand victories to feel alive. A quiet sunset, a warm shower, a genuine compliment. These are victories in themselves. Over time, this appreciation shapes your perspective. You stop seeking joy only in milestones or achievements. You start noticing it in small, everyday moments. You start measuring life not by how smooth it is, but by how fully you experience it. Pain teaches you that the ordinary is extraordinary when you pay attention. And so, once you have walked through suffering, your sense of wonder changes. You laugh harder, you hug longer, you savor meals more deeply. You pause to look at the sky. You notice the wind on your skin and the sound of rain on the roof. Pain sharpens your awareness of life's subtleties and makes the smallest joys feel monumental. Pain does not just hurt. It teaches, it guides, and it refocuses your vision. It makes you notice that life is full of small, radiant moments that were always there. You just needed to feel the weight of its absence to see their true value. Suffering reveals your inner resilience. There is a strange moment in suffering when you realize the world is heavier than you expected. Life seems to pile challenge after challenge on your shoulders, and at first it feels unbearable. You question whether you can survive this. You question whether you can endure another setback, another heartbreak, another disappointment. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a part of you keeps moving. That part is your inner resilience showing itself, even before you consciously recognize it. Suffering has a way of revealing the strength you didn't know you had. Most people think resilience is visible only when life is easy or when success is obvious. But the truth is, resilience is forged in struggle. It does not announce itself with applause. It quietly persists when every instinct tells you to give up. When pain, loss, or failure presses against you, resilience is the voice that whispers, "Keep going." It is the part of you that has endured more than you realize, that has survived storms before, and can survive this one too. Suffering pulls that voice out of hiding. Psychologists describe resilience as the capacity to adapt to adversity, but it is not a skill you can learn in comfort. It is activated under pressure. When suffering hits, your coping mechanisms are tested. Your emotions surge, your mind races, and your patience is stretched thin. That is the environment where resilience emerges. You start making choices, small ones at first, that keep you moving forward. Every day you endure, every decision you make to continue despite the struggle strengthens that inner core. Think about the times you faced something difficult and didn't give up. Maybe it was a personal loss, a failure at work, or an emotional setback that left you questioning yourself. At the time, it may have felt like survival was all you were doing. But in hindsight, you notice how much strength it took to keep showing up. Suffering does not allow shortcuts. It demands that you confront your limits, and in doing so, teaches you that those limits are far higher than you ever imagined. Suffering also exposes the illusions of control. You realize that life does not always bend to your plans or expectations. And in that realization, you discover another layer of resilience. The ability to adapt. Flexibility in the face of hardship becomes a lifeline. You cannot always change what happens, but you can choose how to respond. That choice, made consistently, is the essence of resilience. There is also an emotional refinement that suffering brings. When you endure challenges, you learn to tolerate discomfort. You learn to manage fear, frustration, and grief without letting them consume you. You learn that strength is not about suppressing pain, but about moving through it. Every difficult experience adds to an invisible reservoir of endurance that you draw upon in future hardships. That reservoir is your inner resilience made tangible. Another aspect is perspective. Suffering forces you to recognize your own capacity to survive. You realize that you have faced challenges before and lived to tell the story. You see patterns of endurance you never noticed in yourself. That awareness is empowering. It transforms fear into cautious confidence, despair into determination. Painful experiences reveal that resilience is not some abstract trait. It is a living, breathing part of you that grows with each trial. And the beauty of this revelation is that it changes the way you approach life. You start seeing obstacles not as threats, but as tests of your endurance. You stop fearing difficulty the way you once did, because you now know you can handle more than you think. Suffering does not just teach you to survive. It teaches you to thrive within limits that you once believed were insurmountable. Over time, resilience becomes a lens through which you view challenges. You see setbacks as opportunities to learn. You see hardships as a way to strengthen character. You see suffering not as something that breaks you, but as something that shows you how unbreakable you are. Each trial leaves a mark, but also leaves a proof. Proof that you can endure, adapt, and rise again. Suffering does not just reveal weakness or test patience. It illuminates the deep well of inner strength you carry, often unnoticed, until life forces it into the open. It shows you that no matter how harsh the storm, a resilient part of you has been weathering it all along. And recognizing that part changes everything. Grief teaches appreciation for time. There is a moment when grief arrives that changes how you see the world. Not slowly, not gently, but all at once. You notice how quickly life slips through your fingers, how fragile the people you love truly are, and how fleeting every single day can be. Grief has a way of forcing you to confront the reality that time is finite, that nothing lasts forever, and that every moment is precious whether you realize it or not. Pain does not just hurt, it teaches, and grief teaches the value of time like nothing else can. At first, grief overwhelms. It makes ordinary days feel heavy, even unbearable. Tasks you once handled with ease feel impossible. Sleep becomes fragmented. Eating feels mechanical. But beneath that weight, something shifts. You start noticing the small things you previously overlooked. The sound of a loved one's laughter, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the quiet rhythm of a routine you took for granted. Grief sharpens your senses to the passage of time in a way comfort never could. Most people go through life assuming there will always be more hours, more opportunities, more chances to say what needs saying or do what needs doing. Grief shatters that illusion. When someone or something you care about is gone or suddenly threatened, you realize how quickly life can change. You notice that plans are never guaranteed, and the small, everyday moments you ignored are the ones that matter most. There is a psychological explanation for this shift. Grief activates your brain's emotional processing systems, making memories, perceptions, and experiences more intense. It heightens awareness of what is meaningful. What once seemed trivial, the smell of coffee, a phone call from a friend, a quiet evening at home, suddenly feels irreplaceable. Grief forces you to see the value in time itself because you understand, viscerally, that once a moment passes, it cannot be retrieved. Think about the moments grief changes you most. Maybe it is the first holiday without someone you loved. Maybe it is a place that once felt ordinary, now filled with absence. Maybe it is a memory you replay because it is all that remains. In each of these moments, you start to understand that time is not just hours on a clock. It is presence, attention, connection, and experience. Grief teaches that how you spend your time is inseparable from how you live your life. And there is a deeper lesson. Grief shows you what really matters. When someone or something is gone, you realize what you took for granted. You notice the relationships, experiences, and moments that were meaningful all along. It teaches you that time is not a resource to be wasted, but a gift to be used wisely. You begin to prioritize differently. You begin to notice differently. You begin to live differently. Grief also teaches patience. While it is painful, it forces you to slow down. It shows that rushing through life or ignoring moments does not protect you from loss. You start savoring the time you have, not just with others, but with yourself. Every conversation, every gesture, every laugh becomes weightier because grief has opened your eyes to the fragility of presence. Over time, the lessons of grief transform how you approach the future. You stop postponing the things that matter. You speak the words you would otherwise leave unsaid. You spend time intentionally. You notice details you once ignored. You understand that life is measured not by how much time you have, but by how fully you experience it. Grief does not simply make life harder. It makes life clearer. It forces you to see the fleeting nature of every moment, the irreplaceable value of every day, and the urgency of presence. It teaches that time is the one thing you can never get back, and that the way you spend it defines the meaning of your life. When you carry grief, you carry more than loss. You carry a heightened awareness of the preciousness of now. You learn to honor the present, to hold people closer, to savor experiences deeper, and to recognize that every moment is a gift. Grief teaches appreciation for time in a way that nothing else ever can, and once you feel it, life is never taken for granted again. Pain forces you to rely on yourself. There comes a moment when life hurts so badly that no one can fix it for you. Friends can listen. Family can sympathize. Therapists can guide. But there is a point where you realize that the only person who can carry you through is you. Pain has a way of stripping away dependence, excuses, and illusions, forcing you to face yourself. And in that confrontation, you discover a truth that is both frightening and empowering. You are stronger than you thought, and you can rely on yourself. Most people do not want to be alone in their suffering. We naturally seek comfort from others, hoping someone else can solve our problems or ease our emotional load. And sometimes that support is invaluable. But pain has a way of exposing the limits of reliance. People can only meet you where they are. No one else can live your experience, make your decisions, or feel your emotions for you. Pain forces you to confront your own responsibility, your own capacity, and your own strength. There is a psychological mechanism at play here. When you experience intense emotional or physical pain, your brain activates both stress and coping systems. You are pushed into a state where you cannot outsource your suffering. Your mind is forced to problem solve. Your emotions are forced to regulate themselves. And your body is forced to endure. Pain activates resilience in a way that comfort never does, because it removes all the safety nets you take for granted. Think about the moments when you felt completely alone, even in a room full of people. Maybe it was after a breakup, a loss, a failure, or a betrayal. Maybe it was a time when your emotions felt so raw that no advice, no empathy, no support could reach the core of what you were going through. In that isolation, you had to make choices. You had to move forward. You had to endure. You had to remind yourself that you were capable, even when the world seemed to offer no help. That is the moment pain teaches self-reliance. Pain also exposes where you have been dependent on others unnecessarily. You realize how often you have looked for validation, guidance, or permission to act. You see how much of your energy has gone toward relying on someone else to make you feel safe, confident, or capable. And the hard truth is that external validation is temporary. Pain forces you to find your own source of strength, your own guidance, and your own sense of security. There is a freedom that comes with this realization. When you understand that you can handle your own struggles, you no longer feel tethered to others for approval or protection. You learn to trust your own judgment. You learn to sit with your own emotions without fear. You learn that your capacity to endure is greater than you imagined. Pain strips away the illusions of dependence and replaces them with the clarity of self-sufficiency. And self-reliance is not just about survival. It also teaches growth. When you rely on yourself, you are forced to confront uncomfortable truths, make hard decisions, and take responsibility for your own progress. You develop problem-solving skills, emotional intelligence, and resilience that would have remained dormant in comfort. Pain becomes a teacher, and your own strength becomes the lesson. Over time, you start noticing subtle shifts. You make choices with more confidence because you have practiced trusting yourself. You handle challenges with more patience because you know you can endure. You navigate relationships and responsibilities with greater clarity because you are no longer dependent on others to validate your decisions. Pain has reshaped your inner landscape, showing you that the most reliable person in your life is yourself. There is also a quiet pride in this realization. You start to appreciate the toughness, courage, and resilience you carry quietly every day. Pain does not just teach you self-reliance. It shows you the depth of your inner resources. You learn that even when everything falls apart, you can stand, you can adapt, you can heal, you can move forward. Pain forces you to rely on yourself, not because life is cruel, but because it is honest. It removes illusions, reveals true capability, and strengthens your independence. And once you experience this truth, you begin to live differently, with confidence, with resilience, and with the unshakable knowledge that you have what it takes to face whatever comes next. Difficult choices clarify your values. There is something incredibly revealing about the moments when life backs you into a corner and forces you to choose. Not the easy choices, not the convenient ones, but the ones that split you open. The choices where either path costs you something. The choices you cannot delay, avoid, or outsource. Those are the moments when your real values rise to the surface. Difficult choices have a way of stripping away the noise and showing you what truly matters to you. Not what you say matters, not what you wish mattered, but what actually does. Most people think they know their values. They say they value honesty, loyalty, growth, peace, or passion. But values are not revealed in comfort. They are revealed when you are torn between two things you care about. When choosing one means sacrificing the other. That is when the truth becomes undeniable. Difficult choices expose the gap between your stated values and your lived values. Imagine someone who always said they value stability, but when the opportunity to chase a dream appears, they choose uncertainty because deep down they value potential more than comfort. Imagine someone who insists they value loyalty, yet eventually walks away from a toxic relationship because they actually value self-respect more. Difficult choices uncover the hierarchy of your values, the ones that stand at the top when your back is against the wall. There is a psychological reason for this clarity. When the brain experiences decision stress, it prioritizes what feels most essential to survival and identity. All the peripheral preferences fall away. You stop caring about approval, convenience, or appearances. You focus on what feels fundamentally right. This is why difficult choices often feel emotionally intense. They are decisions that define who you are becoming, and this clarity often appears in the moments you fear most. Think about times when you had to choose between staying in a job that drained you or risking uncertainty for something better. Think about choosing whether to forgive someone who hurt you or protect yourself by walking away. Think about deciding whether to remain small to keep others comfortable or expand into the person you know you could be. These are not just decisions. They are declarations of identity. Difficult choices also reveal your boundaries. You learn what you will no longer tolerate. You learn what you refuse to compromise on. You learn the difference between sacrifice and self-betrayal. When you are forced to choose, you start to understand which parts of yourself are negotiable and which parts are non-negotiable. And often, the painful choices highlight values you did not realize you held so deeply. Another powerful aspect is how difficult choices strip away external influence. You can ask for advice, but no one else can feel the weight of the decision the way you do. And because the cost is personal, the truth becomes personal. You must answer to yourself, not to expectations or pressures. That is where values emerge with the most honesty. You also learn that clarity does not come from thinking endlessly about a decision. It comes from recognizing the emotional truth underneath it. Your body reacts when a choice violates your integrity. You feel tension, guilt, restlessness, or dread. On the other hand, when a decision aligns with your values, there is a sense of calm even if the path is difficult. Difficult choices force you to listen to that internal compass, the part of you that knows when something is right, even if it is hard, and once you choose, something shifts. You feel stronger because you acted with intention. You feel clearer because you honored who you are instead of who you were expected to be. Difficult choices shape your identity more powerfully than easy ones. They carve out your character. They refine your priorities. They show you what you are willing to fight for, protect, sacrifice, or pursue. Over time, these moments become turning points. You look back and realize the choices that hurt the most were the ones that defined you the most. They taught you what you value, not in theory, but in practice. They taught you what aligns with your heart, what anchors your soul, and what guides your actions. Difficult choices clarify your values because they force you to choose your truth over your comfort. And once you make decisions rooted in who you really are, you begin to live a life that finally feels like your own. Hitting rock bottom creates reinvention. There is a moment in every person's life when everything collapses at once, and you feel the ground disappear beneath you. It is not dramatic in the way movies show it. It is quiet, heavy, lonely. That point where you say to yourself, I cannot keep living like this. When you hit rock bottom, you are not just facing pain. You are facing the truth you have been avoiding for years. And strangely, that is where reinvention begins. Rock bottom is not simply the worst moment of your life. It is the moment when all the coping mechanisms stop working. The distractions lose their power. The excuses fall apart. The stories you tell yourself can no longer protect you. You are left with the raw reality of your choices, your habits, your fears, and your patterns. And it feels like everything is falling apart. But what is actually happening is that everything false is falling away. What most people never understand is that rock bottom has a psychological effect that almost nothing else can create. When your brain senses that the old way of living is no longer sustainable, it enters a state of forced adaptation. This is why people who hit their lowest point often experience sudden clarity. They finally see the changes they have been postponing. They feel an urgency they never felt before. Pain shuts down denial, and once denial dissolves, truth becomes impossible to ignore. When you are at the bottom, you stop caring about pleasing people. You stop caring about protecting your ego. You stop caring about maintaining an image. You become more honest with yourself than you have ever been in your entire life. And that honesty is the birthplace of reinvention. Because you cannot rebuild until you admit what was broken. Rock bottom exposes the habits and relationships that were draining you. It reveals the dreams you abandoned. It shows you the ways you betrayed your own potential. And yes, That realization hurts. It feels like failure. But it is actually the moment when your identity starts to shift. You begin to question everything that once felt normal. You begin to challenge the roles you played. You begin to ask yourself who you would be if fear was not leading your decisions. Some people only discover their courage once they have nothing left to lose. That is the hidden power of hitting the bottom. When everything is stripped away, you are finally free to rebuild without the weight of old expectations. You get to rewrite the story. You get to rebuild your identity based on who you want to become, not who you were pretending to be. And reinvention does not begin with ambition. It begins with tiny steps. Waking up earlier, drinking more water, cleaning your space, ending the conversations that drain you, letting go of the relationships that thrive on your weakness. These small actions feel insignificant, but psychologically, they signal to your mind that you are choosing life again, that you are choosing growth again, that you are refusing to stay the person who sank to the bottom. Over time, these small actions create momentum, and once momentum begins, reinvention accelerates faster than you expect. You notice you no longer tolerate disrespect the way you used to. You find motivation in places you never looked before. You feel a spark of pride in every tiny win. Confidence returns slowly at first, then all at once. Rock bottom also teaches you strength you did not know you had, not the strength of toughness or pretending you are fine. The strength of resilience, the strength of rebuilding something from nothing, the strength of choosing to rise when staying down would be easier. That kind of strength stays with you for life. It becomes part of your identity. And the beautiful part is this: when you reinvent yourself from rock bottom, your future becomes less fragile. You understand that you can survive the collapse. You know you can rebuild. You trust your ability to rise, and that trust changes the way you walk through the world. Hitting rock bottom feels like an ending, but for most people, it is the first real beginning. It is the moment you stop living by survival and start living by intention. It is where the old you breaks and the real you finally gets to breathe. Emotional pain teaches self-control. There is a strange turning point that happens when emotional pain stops feeling like chaos and starts feeling like a lesson. At first, pain hits you like a wave you cannot control. You react without thinking. You say things you regret. You spiral. You cling. You shut down. You let your emotions run the entire show. But somewhere in the middle of all that turmoil, you get tired of losing control. You get tired of being dragged around by feelings that change every hour. And that exhaustion becomes the moment where self-control finally takes root. Emotional pain teaches you self-control in a way nothing else can, because it puts you face to face with the consequences of your own reactions. When you lash out, when you chase after someone who walked away, when you beg for closure that never comes, when you punish yourself for things you cannot change, the aftermath hits harder than the moment itself. Pain has this way of showing you that some of your suffering is not coming from the situation, but from the way you respond to it. At some point you start asking yourself the real questions. Why did I react that way? Why did I give that person so much power? Why did I let that moment define my entire mood? That kind of questioning is not weakness. It is self-awareness. And self-awareness is the foundation of self-control. One of the most powerful psychological shifts happens when the brain experiences repeated emotional distress. It begins to build what researchers call emotional regulation pathways. In simple terms, your brain starts learning how to pause before it reacts. It starts creating distance between the feeling and the action. This is not something you learn in peaceful moments. This is something forged when you are hurt, confused, angry, or overwhelmed. Pain forces your brain to adapt so you do not break. And this adaptation shows up in small but meaningful ways. You stop sending long messages in the heat of the moment because you know you will regret them later. You stop trying to win every argument. You stop reacting to every trigger. You begin to understand that not every thought deserves your attention, and not every feeling deserves an immediate response. That is emotional self-control, and it is born from the pain of learning the hard way. Another thing emotional pain teaches you is how to separate what you feel from what is actually happening. When you are hurt, the mind automatically exaggerates. Everything feels urgent. Everything feels personal. But after enough painful experiences, you begin to notice your own patterns. You catch yourself overthinking. You recognize when your fear is louder than reality. You start saying things like, "I feel this way, but I know it might not be true." That ability to hold both the emotion and the truth at the same time is one of the highest forms of self-control. Pain also teaches you the value of restraint. Not the kind of restraint that suppresses your emotions, but the kind that protects your peace. You learn that reacting does not always help you. That chasing validation drains you. That trying to control everything only creates more chaos. So you begin practicing the art of letting certain thoughts pass without grabbing onto them. You let silence do the talking sometimes. You walk away instead of proving a point. And for the first time, that feels like strength instead of defeat. The more emotional pain you experience, the more you realize that self-control is not about shutting your feelings down. It is about managing them in a way that keeps your dignity intact. It is about choosing your response instead of letting your impulses choose it for you. It is about giving yourself a moment to breathe so you can act from clarity instead of panic. Eventually, emotional pain becomes one of your greatest teachers. It shows you your triggers. It reveals your patterns. It forces you to grow the skills you avoided developing when life was easy. And once you learn self-control through pain, you move differently. You speak differently. You choose differently. You stop letting temporary emotions make permanent decisions. You become someone who can feel deeply without falling apart. Someone who can remain calm in situations that once swallowed you whole. That is what emotional pain gives you. Not just strength, not just resilience, but a level of self-control that turns chaos into clarity and hurt into wisdom. Discomfort strengthens mental toughness. There is a moment every person faces where discomfort stops feeling like an inconvenience and starts feeling like an awakening. You notice it the first time you push through something you used to avoid. That moment when you want to quit, when your mind is screaming for the easy way out, but something in you refuses to back down. That is where mental toughness starts forming, not in comfort, not in confidence, but in the places where you feel stretched, challenged, and uncertain. Discomfort has a way of exposing how much strength you actually have versus how much strength you thought you had. Everyone feels capable when life is smooth. Everyone believes they are mentally strong when nothing is testing them. But the truth shows itself the second discomfort enters the picture. When plans fall through, when things get complicated, when effort outweighs reward, that is when you learn who you are under pressure. The reason discomfort strengthens mental toughness is simple. The mind adapts to whatever it repeatedly experiences. Just like muscles grow under stress, the brain grows under resistance. Neuroscientists call this adaptive stress. When you face discomfort, your brain does not just endure it. It reorganizes your neural pathways so you can handle more next time. That is why what once felt overwhelming eventually feels normal. Discomfort stretches your capacity, and that expanded capacity becomes mental toughness. Think about the small moments when you feel discomfort, but continue anyway. Waking up earlier than you want to. Starting a task even when motivation is nowhere to be found. Continuing a workout when your body wants to stop. Confronting a difficult conversation instead of avoiding it. These moments look small from the outside, but psychologically they are huge. Every time you stay in discomfort, your mind builds evidence that you can handle more than you believed. You start trusting yourself in situations where you used to panic or give up. What is even more powerful is how discomfort reshapes your perception of fear. When you repeatedly do things that scare you or challenge you, fear loses its control. You stop interpreting discomfort as danger and start seeing it as growth. This shift alone increases mental toughness, because most people never grow simply because they misinterpret the sensation of discomfort. They think it means they are failing, when it actually means they are evolving. Discomfort also forces you to develop patience. Mental toughness is not loud. It is not brute force. Most of the time it looks like calm persistence. The ability to keep going without needing everything to feel good in the moment. Discomfort trains you to detach from instant gratification, to understand that progress often feels frustrating before it feels rewarding. Anyone can act strong when they see quick improvement, but when you stick with something long enough to push through plateaus and uncertainty, that is real mental toughness. Another important piece is how discomfort teaches emotional regulation. When you feel discomfort, your first instinct is usually escape. You want to distract yourself, soothe yourself, or run back to what feels familiar. But when you stay present with discomfort, you begin learning how to manage your internal reactions. You learn how to breathe through stress, how to quiet your impulses, how to choose your response instead of letting discomfort choose it for you. This ability is the core of mental toughness, because the strongest people are not those who feel the least discomfort, but those who handle it with the most grace. Over time, discomfort becomes less intimidating. You start seeking it instead of running from it. You look for challenges because you know challenges shape you. You stop expecting life to be easy, and instead you focus on becoming someone who can handle difficulty without breaking. That mindset shift is the heart of mental toughness. And here is the surprising thing. When you build mental toughness through discomfort, your overall stress drops. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become stronger. Things that once overwhelmed you now feel manageable. Situations that used to drain you now feel like practice. You realize discomfort is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Discomfort strengthens mental toughness because it forces you to grow in the exact areas where you once felt weak. It teaches you endurance, patience, emotional balance, courage, and resilience. And once you learn how to sit with discomfort instead of escaping it, you become someone who can face life directly, without collapsing, without shrinking, and without losing yourself in the process. Pain reveals the truth about people and yourself. There comes a point when pain strips everything down to its bare bones, and suddenly the truth you could not see before becomes impossible to ignore. Pain has this strange ability to turn the lights on in a room you have been stumbling through for years. It reveals the truth about the people around you, but even more uncomfortably, it reveals the truth about you. And the moment you recognize that, something shifts in the way you move, the way you choose, and the way you protect your peace. You start noticing things you used to overlook. The friend who only checks in when they need something. The partner who loves the version of you that makes their life easier, not the version of you that has needs and dreams. The family member who supports you as long as you follow the script they created for your life. When things are good, these dynamics are easy to miss because comfort is a fantastic distractor. But when pain enters the picture, every hidden intention, every silent imbalance, every unspoken tension finally becomes visible. Pain shows you who stands with you out of love and who stands with you out of convenience. It reveals who listens to understand you and who listens to shape your narrative to fit their expectations. Pain highlights who offers support without keeping score and who only gives when they are sure they will get something back. You start realizing that some people were never rooting for you. They were rooting for the version of you that served them. But as much as pain exposes others, the deeper revelations come from what it exposes within you. Pain brings out the instincts you learned from childhood, the defense mechanisms you rely on, the insecurities you try to hide. Some people shut down. Some people chase. Some people over-explain. Some go silent. Some pretend they are fine until they break privately. Pain forces you to face the parts of yourself you built to survive, not to thrive. You begin to see the ways you abandon yourself, the moments you settle for less because you fear being alone, the times you silence your needs because you want to be liked, the situations where you give too much just to feel worthy. Pain calls out these patterns not to punish you, but to wake you up, to make you aware of the habits shaping your life. There is a psychological reason for this sharp clarity. When the brain goes through emotional distress, its default filters weaken. You stop idealizing people. You stop sugar-coating reality. You stop clinging to illusions. Pain activates areas of the brain that focus on survival and authenticity. Anything false becomes too heavy to carry. And although this level of truth can hurt, it also frees you, because once you know the truth, you cannot unknow it. You cannot go back to pretending someone cares when they consistently show you they do not. You cannot ignore the way you betray your own boundaries. You cannot close your eyes to the reality that some people only loved the version of you they could control. Pain also teaches you something powerful about loyalty. You learn that loyalty without reciprocity is not loyalty. It is self-abandonment. You learn that you cannot keep pouring into people who only drain you. You learn that your presence is valuable and not everyone deserves access to it. Pain teaches you that the right people do not disappear when things get difficult. They step closer, not away. And as for yourself, pain pushes you to grow into the person you wished you were before everything fell apart. You become more honest with your needs, more protective of your energy, more selective with your time, more aware of your patterns, and more willing to break them. Pain sharpens your understanding of who you are becoming, not just who you have been. The truth revealed by pain is not meant to make you bitter. It is meant to make you awake. It is meant to help you stop repeating the same cycles. It is meant to guide you toward people who can meet you where you are, not where they want you to stay. And most importantly, It is meant to bring you closer to the version of yourself that is strong enough to handle truth without running from it.